All right, we've got our special board meeting tonight, Thursday, October 27th. Mr. Wade, please call the roll.
Ms. Briner.
Here?
Ms. Cook.
Here.
Ms. Jessling.
Present?
Ms. Payne.
Here.
Mr. Tuttle.
Right here.
Thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag. We'll roll right into Board of Education report and recommendations, business, starting with OSBA Capital Conference.
So I'm not sure who wants to start the conversation about the resolutions. I think all of you guys have them at either hard copy or electronically. Did you guys, I'm not sure how you want to approach that. Do you want to just go line by line through those resolutions, or just to make sure that we have everybody's
voting,
input?
Tom, why don't you lead?
Okay, let me get my folder right here, and I'll lead it.
Awesome.
Yep. My honor. I don't know, do you want me to read them? That's a lot of reading.
Well, maybe if you go over section by section,
Yeah,
Well-
why don't
or
we
you want to
just-
skip to
We'll
the
go with
parts that are
resolution.
changed.
Go one resolution at a time, ask for comments. Hopefully, everybody's read them. I've made a few notes, but I'd prefer if... So I'll read the title. Resolution 2022-1, submitted by staff, adds and removes language in the Students and Learning section Drug Abuse Prevention Plank.
What line are you on?
Okay, that would be page 18, line 124, it looks like.
Oh, I'm jumping right to the resolutions.
Okay, so you're
Some of
going
us
to
are just
skip over
following
things that
along.
are the same as they've been and just going to where there's changes? Because that's the first change.
Line 123.
123, 24.
Whatever's your pleasure, if you want to go
No,
resolution by resolution.
I just want to make
because
sure I
that's-
can.
That's how the legislation is going to go, with a vote on all of these by 600 representatives from
You're
one
going to
from
have the
each.
handbook, so you're going to go through all 100, or 56 pages.
Oh, I didn't bring the handbook for everybody. That's,
I'm kind of doing both. I think Ginny's doing the handbook.
I didn't start with the handbook. Well, I'm going to vote on the resolutions from what I understand.
But you're going to go through the handbook. That's fine. We're up to speed. Go ahead.
This is out of the handbook.
Yep, and some of us are following along in the handbook.
Okay. I'd like to read those. I've told you before, it's
ahead.
way too small on the iPad.
Go ahead.
So if you'd like me to read the first paragraph, I could certainly do that.
No.
Or what your
No, I
preference
think
is.
we're all honing in on the change. Are we right?
Yeah. Yes. So it looks like the proposed is taking out heroin and other opioid and change it to drug abuse.
So it's broader, more generic. That looks okay to me.
So when the vote is taken on the floor, do you go down line by line like this? So you're voting on this exact change and then not the next change, or is it the whole resolution?
Just the changes.
Okay.
But broken down item by item within a resolution?
They'll go line by line.
Okay, that's what I was wondering too.
Do we need to do that, Mary?
Yeah.
Well, I would support this change.
Yeah. It's just condensing wording.
Yeah.
Is there anyone that would not support that change here?
No, because you never know what new thing might
Right.
be a concern or an issue, and the key part is abuse.
Resolution 2022-2. So it provides new and additional dedicated funds to assist schools in the battle against drug addiction, heroin, and other opioid abuse. Any other changes in that? That's the only thing, right, on that? Any input, comments?
And that's line 131.
would support that as well.
I agree.
So it's okay.
So we're going to go yes on that one.
Well, I don't know if we're supposed to be taking a vote on this or not.
Yeah, that's the whole purpose, Tom.
We're going to vote?
We're voting so
Okay.
that you know how to vote.
Well, wait, that would have to be a policy change, to my understanding, for the vote of the board to then be
At
what
a
Tom
work
is
session?
doing. Because we don't have a policy right now that states anything about this, right?
I thought that
About the
was our
delegate process?
understanding when we decided that we wanted the discussion so that our delegate knew how to vote. Because our delegate represents the entire board. So that's what they would do.
I think, though, we would need a policy change
What we're
to
looking
do
for is
that.
guidance. Just
I
kind
don't
of
think
like
we need
a
a policy,
consensus
just from a policy
conversation.
standpoint, yeah.
Right.
So I know
Good or
Riverside had the
bad.
same
It's not I
same
agree
thing.
or you say yes. We're not looking for yeses and I approve. We're looking for input.
Concerns, input.
Correct.
Just like
Yes.
they're going to have at the conference. It's not going to be, how does everybody vote? There'll be input there at the time.
And when I brought it up at the board meeting, I just wanted whoever is going to vote I wanted a discussion on it so that we all know where everybody stands. And then after the vote is taken, I think the person who does vote needs to report back on how they voted so that the board and the community is aware on how they voted. That was my understanding.
Yeah, because
Because
I
I-
remember you saying.
Yeah,
that.
and I know Riverside, they actually had to do a policy change in order to have the voting process instead of just the discussion, and then that's how we're going to vote.
I don't think there's anything that precludes the board from doing it any way that they want. There's no policy that I'd say would conflict from them doing it this way. Whether they decided as a board that they needed a policy is up to that local Board of Education.
Well, one has to keep in mind that there's 599 other members that's going to have members' input, right? They have conversation, right?
Voting
They open the floor
individuals.
before the vote is called,
If there's discussion.
if there's discussion offered by anyone.
But I thought the purpose of us getting together was to direct Tom on how the board here wanted Tom to vote.
That was my understanding too, because Tom is our delegate.
Right.
Representing us as a body.
Right.
Okay, let's move forward. I put a check mark on it. Seems
So,
everybody agrees with it.
so on 2022-2, did we say yes on that one?
What sounds like we have consensus.
I have a question, though, because I know during the delegate assembly, things can come for a vote that's not given prior. So I don't know if, Mary, if you've experienced that before, but speaking with a couple people who have been delegates in the past, they said that sometimes you go to the delegate assembly and somebody, it'll arise from the floor. So then he would have to vote on things without us knowing
Like a different policy. do you
different
mean?
things, yeah.
Well,
So
I
that's-
guess if there's a different policy that comes up, he's our delegate. I
They'll have to
understand
make a
that, but what
decision.
we know is coming up, then we would give input to, I would imagine.
And because you've done it so many years, Mary, have you had that happen often?
Not very
Where
often.
something was different from the platform?
Doesn't happen very often.
Yeah. Because I would think, too, most of this is probably gone over by council, OSBA council. So are they present to make sure if something was tweaked, that the wording would be?
There's a whole committee and a whole board.
After the delegates' work or prior to, and that's what we have here in front of us. That's why I was just wondering if there was some kind of a divergence from this.
It would go, there's a whole panel that
at
reviews
present
everything.
there, not at a future time, but right there on the spot. Gotcha.
Right,
Okay.
So going forward, we're just making not an official policy, but like, this is what we're going to set going forward for every year after that then? Where it's, we meet, we vote, and then the delegate goes. Because I'm okay with that if that's how we're going to do it, just moving forward in general, every year.
Yeah.
Be fine with me.
I thought that's what you wanted when you
Yeah,
brought it
that's
up.
what I
So
thought, too.
that's what,
No,
yeah.
I just thought, because there's really just one thing on here that I saw that could be an area of discussion. So I wanted to just make sure that the community is aware that we're having that discussion in front of them, and they know where we stand on that before we send somebody in our taxpayer dollars to go, vote. And what they do with that vote is then, it raises to the legislative platform, and they go and lobby on behalf of OSBA. So,
From the last meeting too, was discussed that we would just hit the ones that we felt might be
that's what I thought.
controversial
Yeah.
issues rather than going through everything line by line.
That's fine.
So should we just get to the
Does anybody have any
others?
Well-
contentious items on this list?
I do have one concern with this policy here. It is line 139. So it looks like they would add in the words that OSPA opposes legislation that allows public school personnel to use marijuana while employed by any public school. Excuse me. So, of course, I agree that we shouldn't have people under the influence of drugs, while they're working at a public school. And that would include, we wouldn't want a person that was high on the job. However, marijuana is being used in different ways now. And with medical marijuana, I feel like this doesn't clarify if it's medical marijuana or, a recreational, I want to get high marijuana. And we could have staff or students that are prescribed, marijuana that's not getting them high because they have seizures, they have epilepsy, they have, excuse me, multiple sclerosis, chemotherapy, they could have PTSD. So there's just uses, and that, for me, this line is a concern because it doesn't separate out medical marijuana and recreational marijuana. If it had, it would be a different discussion for me, but I would vote against this because of the way it's worded.
Good
That's
point, Maggie.
interesting, because the line above it talks about recreational marijuana.
Yes.
So I wonder if they just added in recreational?
If they added in recreational,
That's it seemed
then
like,
yes.
And I can see where
But-
that could be a point of discussion on the floor.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that makes sense because that went up for a statewide vote, was 2 years ago.
Yes.
So what we could do as a body is direct Tom to pose the question that either we remove it or we specify recreational.
Only?
I would prefer that.
That it will,
Read better, too.
that they'll lobby against any law that would allow the use of recreational marijuana by a district employee.
So what you're saying, if they don't, then you don't agree with this?
That's my opinion. I don't know
So,
if that's everyone's, but
A, it
that's my.
either needs to be removed, or B, it needs to specify recreational.
Yeah, I agree with
So you
that.
bring up a good point. Does everyone agree?
Yeah, because 134 is opposing recreational.
Recreational, yeah.
Okay. Got it.
That's in our board policy right now.
So are we doing all of them, or are we doing?
The ones that have changes, I guess, we're going to focus on those,
When they're at work.
unless you have a concern about something.
Yeah, I would focus more on the ones that people may have questions on,
Yeah.
like Maggie just did. And if there's not,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't
I
have
don't know if we
questions
need
on
to-
many, but
Yeah,
it was,
same.
that one just stood out to me.
Glad you brought that up.
And is 206 the, not including all students in the baseline beginning in kindergarten through third grade, is that addressing the fact that the state report card separates depending on the number of students who are coming in below proficiency or below whatever the,
Jenny, what line are you on?
Yeah, what?
so I'm down at
207?
207, yeah. That there's an opposition to legislation that doesn't include all students in the baseline. So does that mean, like, for example, Solon doesn't get the K-3 proficiency score because they don't have enough students who don't meet the standard? And so if you have enough students who don't meet the standard, then you get that assessment included in your state report card. So is this trying to make sure that all students K-3 are being included in that literacy standard?
Now, you realize there's no change there, right? You're just
Correct.
questioning what that's
Yeah,
talking about?
I'm just wondering what
Okay.
that's talking about.
I don't know. I mean, I guess that could be exempting students. You know, sometimes we exempt students with certain disabilities.
And those
I'm
that
not sure
are
what
on
they mean.
alternate assessment potentially too?
And there's so few of those students
Right.
anymore, that's very
Yeah, since we
rare.
have to be 1% or below at this point.
Yeah,
What line was that?
207.
207, it has to do with the system of assessments.
If we're going to go through all of these, is there a way to pull it up on the screen so people in the audience can maybe see it and see what we're talking about? I don't know if there's a way, it just might be easier, and all of us
Maybe
can be
I
on the
could-
same
What do you
page.
use?
You
Could I cast it?
can use mine.
Yeah, I don't have it on the device either.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's got to be something with that K-3 literacy
That's-
component on the report cards.
Maybe Tom can get some clarification
Get
on
some
that.
clarification on that.
Which resolution number is that?
It's
It's not a resolution.
line number 207.
Line 207?
It's out of the handbook, Tom, so.
Section is it
it's-
under?
There's a link.
It's under
right-
state report card.
Yeah, it's on, it's,
I have to make a phone call to the state tomorrow anyway, and the person I'm speaking to actually might have an answer to this, so maybe I'll try and get an answer
Beforehand?
beforehand,
Okay.
even for you,
So if you
Tom.
don't, yeah, if they can clarify, then you don't have to.
I think what they're saying too is that if you don't include everybody in the baseline, you're not having a true baseline, it would be weighted higher, right? If you exclude certain kids,
Right.
you're not, so you would be, you'd have a weighted piece.
That's one of those data points that
I'm
was
just a CFO.
pretty much manipulated by different school districts, depending on how big of a scoop you want to take to provide interventions for. Some districts took a really shallow scoop and
Don't get any score.
and got an A, or now what's going to be 5 stars on that indicator. Every district I've worked at previously has always taken a big scoop because we want to make sure that we're providing the appropriate intervention for students. And we didn't really care what that indicator said on the report card because we were doing what was in the best interest of the kids.
Exactly. So
I'll
that's,
see if I can get that
that's why I
clarification
wondered
tomorrow,
if
too.
this would mean that everybody would
Yeah.
get a score for that literacy piece, which would be very good. It gives you
Mm-hmm.
a chance then to see if you have, excuse me, a peer district that's doing a better job,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Or if we're doing a better job, then we can share some of our strategies.
Right.
Was there any
she's
discussion
right
on
now.
line 198 to 204 that deals with testing, assessments, and accountability? I didn't have any.
I was fine with that.
What resolution was that one?
It's the second one.
Because I don't have my-
Moves towards a
Two,
varied
okay.
system of assessments that allows students.
The 198, line 198 through 204. This is the board.
I had on the iPad, but.
Yeah, no, so that's, this is the statement
Okay.
that has been tweaked or added. Must be added,
It looks like added.
added.
Okay.
Mhm. And I thought it read well.
There it is.
Thank you.
Thanks. That's okay.
No, that was fine.
Thank you. Oh, is it better sideways, I think?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
that's
is
good.
better.
I'll try to,
Perfect.
okay.
All right.
So are we going to, are we going to the next one, or are we just going to pick where we have notes?
Do you want to just scroll down to the next one so we
Sure.
can?
254.
Yeah, there we go.
I thought that seemed like a reasonable proposal.
Yeah, it's fine.
Any concerns?
None that I'm aware of. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You're still, okay.
Yeah.
So then the next one. There. 393?
So skipping 271.
Oh, did I skip one?
Mhm.
Scrolling too quick.
271 is the Academic Distress Commission, and that has
Oh,
not-
I didn't see that,
Strikeout,
yeah.
Yeah, there's some strikeouts and a modification. That seemed fine to me.
So go back to 393. So reduces the term length of an elected Board of Education member to anything less than 4 years.
Okay. 371, is that where you are?
393.
Okay.
I don't have any concerns here.
I disagree with it, but I'm probably the odd one out, so I just think there should be limits, consecutive limits on number of years for board members. But
So the second one down imposes limits on the number of terms you feel like
Yeah.
there should be term limits.
I do, but
I mean, I don't feel strongly either way, so tell me your thoughts.
I think that other people, should have a chance. And I think that once you do have name recognition, you've been on it for 10 years, it's hard to get other people in. Fresh eyes are always really good. Sorry, no, I'm not saying anything against anybody who's been here for a long time. I just feel like that in general about any elected position, so.
That's fair.
So what if you have nobody
Nothing
run
personal.
it? Because Tom and I have had times when we were unopposed.
Good question.
That's a good question. Yeah, then I'd say, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if nobody's running against you or anybody, and then they should be able to go again.
So should we have term limits or no? That's the question.
I think the point made about there being a shortfall in candidates willing to serve, that's changed recently, but prior to that, was
Right.
not something that was rare. Even now, like one of our new city council person is running unopposed. And so And I think you're right about name recognition gives an advantage, but I think there's a robust energy around all kinds of elections, so that, you know, you have the opportunity to debate and share your point of view, and let the public then decide what they would like.
Tom, what are your thoughts?
I see no reason to change. I don't see any reason to change.
I think it'll be very interesting to see if that comes up in conversation during the session.
Yeah. That's just my
What
2
has the
cents,
average
but-
been? 15 is like astronomical. Not many of them go past. 15 is like,
We've had, and I've seen people, and you'll see people at the conference that
Yeah.
have gone 20 and 30 years.
When we were at our
But the average
OSBA
is
101, there were a
less than
lot that
15.
were,
I don't.
there were a couple that were like 30 years. Remember the one
You mentioned that
person?
one man that
It
was.
was like 30 years, yeah, and I'm like, okay.
Yes.
That's amazing, but also,
Hope we started early.
and
So
not
that's
knowing
okay.
what
I mean-
district those represent. There's what, 600 districts?
611?
So
Yeah.
how many of them are, we're above average in
And some
number
are
of
very
students.
small. And that would be, I think,
Yeah.
difficult for a very small
Some may
community.
be lucky to have 5.
You know, in Kirtland, did you
Yeah.
have multiple candidates for open spots?
We'd have begged people to run.
Yeah. So.
now we don't have that issue, but, yeah. I think even Kirtland had several people running this last time around. But yeah, I understand where you guys are coming from. It's just I feel like that about any elected position, so it sounds like the majority of the board would be okay with it. That's fine.
Otherwise, you'd have to have people appointed
Yeah.
to fill a vacant seat. If there wasn't anybody who stepped forward to run, you'd have to appoint a candidate, and that's less.
We're not considered politicians, and we don't make anything more than $125 a meeting.
And we donate.
So it doesn't pay someone
Yeah, we give some
to
back,
secure their position as a board member because of the
cash.
remuneration, the compensation of the benefits, as we have in our politicians.
We're not in it for the money. No.
Yeah,
No.
I mean, we don't get a company car, we don't have a house in Florida, we don't have a boat.
So are we moving on then?
Yeah.
So basically, you're saying we oppose that, right?
That you're okay with those changes, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just,
We support the.
Support
we
the changes.
support as it's written. My only, are we on 411?
Yeah, I was just waiting. I didn't know if Tom was done making notes.
Yeah, that's the next one.
Yeah.
We're under open enrollment section,
Did I skip
Parental right
another
to
one?
know.
Parental right to,
parental right to know. It's a long one.
411, 412.
Is there anybody that objects to this one? Or has comments, or?
My only comment would be if this created a law where, let's say at the beginning of a school year, you had to lay out your year-long lesson plans, not a syllabus, but lesson plans detail by detail, because most teachers adjust the pacing and content and kind of how you focus on various activities or topics based on the students in front of you. So they're not generic. And so if that was an expectation, because it doesn't say that here, but if that was an expectation that grew out of this spirit of the policy, that would concern me because I think it's untenable. You know, that you would expect a teacher to put all the materials in a big clump. I think that, because then you'd have to make changes and make sure that was okay. I think that's just not practical to good teaching practice. So,
I understand where you're coming with that, but I don't see anything in here that really leads
No.
to that, so I don't see that as an
so
issue.
I just
but-
thought that where it says OSBA opposes legislation that restricts the rights of parents and their guardians, and I would agree with that, that's, of course, but if it was applied in that specific way, because that was talked about in some various other things that I've read, that folks may want the whole list of what materials and topics and supporting documents, all that, I think you would have a lot of redundant work. So you make a plan and then have to keep changing it because you're planning the journey, you know, all the way across the
Yeah.
whole school year. I don't think
I
it's
think
realistic.
I mean, I know that there's the Ohio Revised Code that already allows any parent to see any curriculum or any survey that's, you know, any curriculum, any survey, any X, Y, and Z. So I don't see this kind of replacing that. I just see this as like an extra enforcer to parents' rights. And
Right, that's why I was concerned that it could be applied in that specific way, which I would be, I would object to only because it's not good practice, it's not a good use of that teacher's time and effort, because it could limit creating the most effective teaching for the students that you have in front of you. Let's say, for example, you are teaching long division, and based on the students' scores, you realized, I need to do some reteaching, I need to use another strategy, but you didn't have that included in the list. Now what? So I think, you know, you planned one schedule and now that gets tossed. I don't think it's a good use of the time, or it would make you maybe stick with the schedule. I can't stop here to reteach because I've already committed to this schedule. And I think that would be,
I have to support your thoughts on that too, Jenny. It's a concern for me. The line that's a concern is the parental right to know all aspects of students and learning. The word "all" is my concern is every bit of the lesson plan. It doesn't allow for that dynamic, teachable moment. Something's happened in the class where a child has asked about frogs or something, and you go off and let's research that, let's check that out. Or a child is passionate about something. As teachers, we don't know our students until they're in the classroom. So as things happen in their lives, or as we get to know them, sometimes you're changing how you need to teach them or what materials you're using to motivate them. Parents have every right to know what is being taught to their children, and Ohio law does have those provisions. You know, we know that Ohio schools are already required to provide parents with access to curricular materials, and I completely agree with that. I wholeheartedly agree with that. But the all aspects, and I don't think that you're concerned with having all aspects put out a year before. I mean, that was actually something that was proposed.
yeah, it was.
Let me interrupt. So you don't have what I'm reading.
No. We're looking at, again, the platform, which is the condensed version
This
of
one
what
here
was
speaks to
originally.
that.
I was going to say, does it give more?
Thank you.
It
Oh,
clarifies
thank
all.
you.
In fact,
Let's hear it.
I'll read it verbatim.
Okay.
Susie Lawson moved. Terry Gibson seconded the motion to approve the resolution. Dr. Marguerite Bennett moved to amend the resolution to delete the word "all." And Ed Penrod seconded the motion. President Hurd called for discussion. Discussion followed. President Hurd called for a vote on the amendment. Motion was passed. The amendment was passed.
So
All
where does,
will be removed.
So all would be removed?
All, all, all,
all
So
the
why are
alls?
we getting it like this then?
Yeah, I don't understand why they wouldn't give
Because
us.
that makes a big difference to me. And
Well, this is the what I made copies of.
But in the handbook, all is in there.
when we look
The new
at
handbook or the-
all
Yeah, 'cause you can
aspects.
What
see
you're
it up
gonna be voting
there,
on.
Tom. That's what we're looking at.
So when it says all aspects of students' learning, okay. And then student governance, finance, and personnel. I mean, all aspects of personnel, I mean, what kinds of details?
I think it's just implying that they have the ability to ask the question and
Yeah.
get an answer. I don't think it's saying that you have to lay everything out. It's just saying if someone was to ask,
Yes.
that they would be told.
One of the things that
With what
Tom,
limits, though? I mean, my home address,
Well,
Right.
limits that are protected through what are considered a public record.
Right.
So certain things are not public record,
okay.
personal,
Because it
Phone
doesn't
numbers and
say
things like
that.
that.
It doesn't say.
Well, we
with-
can't,
it
yeah, I
says
think the
all.
danger of, what I would
What's the
suggest, the
intent?
danger of nitpicking language, you have to think of everything in an entire context, right? Like, you can't just look at it as an isolated, situation. There's lots of, other things that come into play with a lot of these policies and legislations that would, be deemed, and going back to your marijuana one, right? Like, we have policy that would dictate that you can't smoke marijuana and come to school, regardless.
Right.
Whether it's
Right.
recreational or medicinal. If you come to work and you don't pass your drug test, you could be fired.
Yes.
So, there's multiple layers to a lot of this information that we're evaluating here tonight.
what made me think of this was one of the legislative items that was included in this past year's meetings, that somebody had formulated a bill, either in the House, I think it was a House bill, that talked about laying out all materials at the beginning of the year, that a teacher would be responsible to do that. And just the downside of that, anybody who's been a teacher knows that,
It's
let's say you're doing
exhaustive.
frog dissection and the frogs didn't come in, we're going to have to switch gears. We're going to do something else, or we're doing a virtual dissection, or whatever it might be. It would lock you in if that law had been passed. So, and this is really 500 and some just voters putting together a platform, and, so. you're
I
right.
think the
I
int-
just don't think I'm not sure that it's worded right.
It's very
to-
broad.
It's
I think
very
it's meant
broad.
It's hard to
way,
be
though.
specific on
It's-
every
it's
line item.
meant that way.
And every thought that it didn't.
Well, maybe my
600 or more
fear
than
is that it's
people were
meant that
having
way.
it. I can tell you
Because-
this is coming up in the legislature. It's
Yes.
already been proposed. It came up after our last board meeting. I received the information after that. Parents' Bill of Rights. 2 Republicans submitted that.
And does it propose having all of the curricular,
No, because when they give me my legislative report, it's a
it's just a
paragraph.
summary?
Yeah, it's a,
So you're not sure whether it would go to that extent?
no, but
I have it if you want.
But
I mean,
I
at
have something
what
on my
point-
phone. that
I have
tells
But
the-
OSBA they didn't support, they can support parental rights without supporting,
Well, if they have
Like-
something else in their
Yeah.
legislative platform that opposes that specific thing, then, yeah, they're not going to lobby for something if they're.
if something's
too-
not practical,
Right.
right? It's going to limit the ability to educate kids.
I think the gist of it is that parents, if they do have a question, or if they want to ask a question about what their kids are, being taught at school, that they have the ability to know things that are being taught in the classroom, or surveys, or, X, Y, and Z. I think that the gist of it is, if parents want to know that the schools are going to be transparent with them and provide the information to the extent that they can.
Well, and I support that.
Legally.
And they already have that under Ohio Revised Code.
Yeah, so which is,
So-
and that's why it says guaranteed by the Ohio Constitution and applicable laws. So kind of going back to your question about someone's address or phone number, if it's not considered necessarily a public record, it wouldn't be something that would be released.
And
Again,
what
so
if-
like when a parent asks, typically, right, as an administrator, what happened to the student who did this to my kid? Well, that
Yeah, it's
student, or
private.
that discipline is protected under FERPA, right? So they don't,
Mm-hmm.
you can't share that. But you can say that the student was disciplined appropriately, and, we'll continue to monitor the situation and everything else, but you can't say that the student was suspended for 10 days for this. That'd be a violation of that other student's, privacy.
I think that the way it's worded, as broad as it is, it's a slippery slope to constantly, doing lesson plans for a year, to having videotapes in classrooms, all of those things that I feel would make it very hard to do your job. Very
But it
hard.
doesn't say that in here, that those would be the kinds of things that they'd be looking at, right?
So the thing-
But it doesn't say anything, and the things that you felt that it said are things we already have in law. So that's why, why would we be,
I mean, there's also
supporting.
other different points in here too, that it ensures that all parents would be notified of policies and procedures. I mean, there's a very long list here. All parents should have access to all, instructional materials such as textbooks. I would assume that's upon request, like if they ask, which not every parent is going to do. That school districts cultivate effective communication with parents with expectations and objectives of providing information to parents to support their proper health, safety, and well-being of their children.
and all of those things I support. It's the one line. It's the all, and it sounds to me like that was discussion on the floor, and that was not taken out. Is that how I should understand that? That they
It was
tried to
discussion within the
remove the
committee.
all?
And so the word all in line 413 is
I don't know,
gone.
that it's not real clear what that all means.
Yeah, all is mentioned, that word
Because that first
appears
line
more
has an
often.
all.
So that to me says, if you're not willing to take that out, then there's a reason. I
When
have a
was the
concern
handbook
with the
printed?
all.
I don't have the handbook. Where's the printing
We're
published
all
date?
looking at it on the
What-
OSBA website.
What date it's on the header, at the end of the thing? Is it published with a date?
September 1st, 2022.
So that was after the,
What update?
when it went to the vote and she passed
I
that.
thought, now that I'm thinking back.
Motion was passed.
On, wasn't it? on
It all should have been
The
removed.
Ohio Board of Education was, maybe that was their discussion to require all materials, all lessons in
This is a result.
August.
I think it was.
Yeah. And
The
so.
handbook.
The handbook's a
if
result of that.
OSBA
So they didn't do what it says.
doesn't, they don't have any power, but they can draw things into the light, so to speak, to share concerns or things that would make it impractical.
So I have a question. If we're looking at this from a teacher perspective, I understand that. But if you're looking at it from a parent perspective, and we're using our taxpayer dollars to, basically allow OSBA via our taxpayer dollars to lobby for us, we have to really keep in mind what the parents would want. And I think a lot of them would have no problem with the word all, because that's their kids, They have a right to know if they want to know.
They have
So-
a right to know, and they have that right. They literally have the right.
Well, not in all
So-
situations. I mean, we know that there are certain surveys and things like that where they currently don't. So I think this is just a broad, parents have rights, and we want, if a parent wants to know a specific thing, that they should be given the right to know that thing.
So,
Can I correct something there, though?
Yeah.
They do have the right to know about surveys.
That's
It's just,
what I
I
was
think the
gonna ask.
question that has been debated is when they have that, when they can see it. And I think the concern is before or after, right? Isn't that, Because a parent could say, hey, if Susie Q, teacher, asked a pronoun survey question, I'd like to see that survey, they would have to be able to get that survey.
Yes.
It would be after the
They
fact,
would.
but it would still be seen by that parent.
Of the survey or the result as well?
Both, public record.
Okay, good to know.
Right, I
We'll
guess,
probably get to that later in our pronouns conversation, but.
But just, I mean, just to be clear, I mean, you know,
Yeah,
they
the
they
right
still
is
have,
there,
yeah,
that
they
it's
still
the
have
Ohio
the
Revised
ability to
Code.
get it for their own child. I mean, if they wanted to see my child's,
Well,
they
right.
can't, they couldn't, because it'd be protected under.
I guess the other thing I'm questioning is, what do parents feel like they're not getting that they want?
I mean, I think that when you look at certain things that even we have done as a district, there could be things where parents feel like that is not fitting for their morals, values, religious beliefs, whatever you want to call it, and that they should have the right to know about that.
But that's what I'm saying, like specifically, what do parents ask for that they can't get when they ask for it?
Well, if they don't know that it's happening, then they don't know to even ask for it. So I think that's why this is important, because it's, you know,
Which
Well-
again, I think we can address.
So it sounds like there's not an issue, but if there were, I guess I'm just having a hard time grasping what it is that we're denying our parents.
well, do you oppose, then do you not think that parents have a right to know all
Oh,
aspects of
no,
students?
not at all. But I've never had an issue with that. I mean,
It's okay.
I've
There-
never,
You could be different than other people. We have diverse set
I
of
would
parents in our
love to
district.
know what our teachers have said, no, you can't have that information. That's what I'm getting at.
So then you
What
sh-
have we denied?
So if you think that you're okay with that and that they should have access to that, then wouldn't you support this?
Yeah.
And
but
if we
with
have
a
Ohio Revised
caveat.
Code, it kind of seems redundant.
I don't think so. I think it's just a reinforcer of parents have rights, and if we're going to tell our community that we don't support this, that sends a pretty big message to the community.
Well, and I think
Just
that
saying,
if-
they're the taxpayers.
I would like to know if a parent asks for something and they're told no. I would like to deal with that.
Okay, well, we will later today, because we will have I believe, a discussion around, pronouns and bathroom usage and that kind of stuff too, so.
Okay, let's get back to this. So the all aspects to me, I think I've been clear that I'm uncomfortable with the all aspects. I think that it can lead to exhaustive paperwork. I think it could lead to a lot of time for staff
I also have a,
to do these things, and I don't know if it would infringe on privacies. I just don't know what it means. I wish that we had better
very
clarification on
broad.
it. So I'm okay with everything else except for that word all. So if on the floor, the all goes away, I would support it. If the all stays, I wouldn't support it. That's.
yeah, I think that's too
fine.
broad, and I think the decision-making in education seems a little broad. I mean, I have never questioned administrators and teachers' decision in my child's education. So I think that's a little broad. I
See,
mean,
and I like that, because I feel like we have trusted companies like Collaborative Classrooms, to provide books, and we all agreed that one book was not fitting. So to
And
just
we
say.
dealt with it.
And just to say that, we're trusting them, trust but verify, right? So,
Right,
you
and
know.
we verified, and we have put things in place to make parents more comfortable. We've asked teachers to share the book lists with the parents and block books. And, if parents have a problem, we want to work with them. Not every parent has an issue with all books.
no, and I'm just giving that
But
as
the
an
parents that
example
do,
of why.
We're going to work with them.
And I'm not saying that every parent feels the same way, because they certainly don't. And I'm just giving one specific example,
And we-
of why parents may feel that way, especially with the Better Lessons thing that
I-
happened
I
last year.
understand
We
that.
learned from that as well, right?
Absolutely.
So we can trust to a certain point, but,
Trust and verify.
a lot of parents are the ones who brought up the Better Lessons thing last year. It wasn't anybody
I
within the
get it.
administration. So I agree with that, and that's okay that you don't. That's okay.
No,
We're-
no, I agree. I'm not disagreeing with you, but we've put things in place we're not telling teachers or parents, sorry, you got to deal with it. We've put things in place. We put 2 board members on a committee so they can have a say in the books. That's a change we put in place. We've allowed parents to see the book lists so that they can vet the books. We're making all kinds of changes to make parents comfortable.
So you agree with that then?
Agree with,
With all of it except for the first one?
I don't agree with this, no. I don't think it's necessary. I think it's too broad.
The whole
I don't
thing?
think it's needed.
Okay, so Mary's a no.
Are we ready to take a vote?
So I understand. I'm only concerning about the particular application if it says, oh, because of that Ohio's Board of Education action or legislation at the State House about producing the whole year's worth of lessons and materials at the beginning of the school year. I know that that was a proposal that was made, and
I wouldn't want our legislative platform to look at that and say, this falls under that, and OSPO would support that. Because I don't support it, and I don't think we should support it. I don't think it's good for education. I believe parents should
So
have
it's not good for
rights.
education, but what about the parents?
the parents have every right to know all
Yes.
materials and lessons, but to produce it at the beginning of the year is contradictory to good teaching practice. So you could do it a month at a time, 6 weeks at a time, even a quarter at a time.
In our district, most of the teachers at the elementary level do weekly updates. This is what we're doing, this is what we did this week, this is what we're doing. They have websites. At the high school level, they have the calendar out, this is what we're doing. So, I mean, if you want to know, and if what they're showing you isn't clear enough, you can easily make a request, and you can look at any of the curriculum. You can come up, so there is transparency. And putting in, I just don't know what would come out of this, and the fact that they wouldn't remove the word all seems, just, to me, it doesn't seem transparent. It seems, I'm not really sure what is happening with that. It could go several directions. So, like if we were looking at the first paragraph, if they took the word all out, sure. The second paragraph, I'm fine with that. The restricts the rights, opposes, I'm fine with that. It's really the one word. So if there was discussion on the floor and that came out, but if there wasn't, my vote is no.
The other thing that I'd like to mention is if this stays in, additions and changes could be made down the road.
Yes.
And it will be the 400 or 500 delegates.
600.
Well, somebody has to be a member and represented to vote that day. But, so let's say it was 500 even. That dilutes any one vote, and you'll get the aggregate of the many. And I think we all agree that the spirit of that is excellent and what we're all trying to promote and have.
Yes.
But based on those other pieces of legislation, proposed legislation or action by the Ohio Board of Education in regard to those specifics, to try to produce that at the beginning of the year is impractical.
I get your point on that, but it doesn't say that. So I guess, we're all kind of, I feel like we've all said what we need to say. So I'm a yes, but I know you are a no based on how it's written now. Ginny,
As
based
long
on
as you
the
take out the word
all.
But we can't. We can't take it out.
But if they
You
just,
could.
That'll happen at the legislative conference. Yeah.
Right, if it happens on the floor,
Right.
then you
We
would
could support it.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, if it's as
Because you
written,
said
then.
it is gone from your,
The link, here, you can look at it, Jenny. It says right here, it's weird. And it says, so if the motion passed, why didn't they update it then?
yeah, that's what I don't know.
That's what it said.
Yeah, because that would have, I mean, this is an electronic document. Three
So-
keystrokes and it's fixed.
Maybe it was an oversight.
Yeah, so we'll assume then we are supporting it. If they put the all back, then I think.
Tom, you didn't say if you support it or not, though. Do you
I
wanna-
support it.
Okay.
I-
I'm like, I don't want us to just talk without getting your input.
When laws and regulations and everything start out, it's really tough to get down into supposition if those people like Ginny, who can get that detail, if they're not participants. Lawmakers can't even get down into that until they turn it over to the lawyers. So I don't know anybody, well, I know a few of the names on the committee who put this together. But things come up after things are written. Laws get amended, policies get changed, just as we do here with our policy book, right? So if you can't cover everything in the first policy, do you not do something because it isn't perfect? Do we work towards perfection to get it passed, or do we get it passed? Do we settle on 60% of the voters saying, yes, all is good? So do we say the 40% who said all is bad, we don't do it? We
Well,
freeze it?
it'll pass. If 60% say, no, it's
Yeah.
fine with an all in there, it's going to pass. We're just giving you some feedback so that when you represent our point of view, if there's opportunity for a question to be asked, because this is a new policy, correct?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's growing across the nation. It's growing across the nation. I couldn't find it on my phone, but, yeah.
So are we for this? How did we decide?
As written against it.
Just the word all is the
Yeah,
exception.
if it's, because it looks like it's passed.
As is, I can't speak to it, whether it's going to get changed or not. As of right now, the way it is, you're either saying you're against the resolution.
So as it is, we're saying no.
No, it's
Correct.
like, as is. Don't say with qualifications, because that's a cop-out. It's like-
So we're saying no.
It's either all or none. You say,
Well, you could
the word all
certainly
is
ask
in,
why
none of this goes
the
forward.
motion wasn't reflected in this text. You could ask that.
Yes, please get that clarification for
I'll
us.
ask.
Yeah,
What that
because
means.
we want to support it.
Yes.
We don't want to throw out the whole thing. It's that specific concern.
Well, I know one of the individuals, I'm not going to tell you his name, I can call him personally and ask him. See if
That'd be
his
great.
name is on here. Let me see
Okay.
if he,
Yeah,
I
that.
know Susie.
yeah. I don't know Susie, I know another individual who's
Are we
been
talking
involved.
about 412 through 430?
413 through 427, I think.
No, just that one word in the first paragraph. All.
No, we're talking about this whole thing.
Right, because it'll be voted on as one unit.
But you want clarification as if
Did they
were,
follow
did
the
they take
motion?
it out? Yeah,
Yeah,
is
that's
line
fine.
413 still going to have all in it when
Because
the
it could
vote
be an
comes?
error and then we're also.
So yeah, get clarification on that, because then if, I
That's
guess
the
if it
problem right
is,
there, the word all.
if
It's
they
an
take
error.
it out, it
I'm
would
gonna have
be-
some, I'm gonna have some issues.
Some
to
strong
convince some
words.
people.
Like, yeah,
30
like,
for a
minutes
minute.
of my life.
thanks a lot.
So are we,
Sorry, Mr. Wade.
is there anything else like going for, because this document is 56 pages long,
Yeah,
are
we still-
there, I mean,
There's two, we're only through
that,
400
yeah, that was
of
really the
first-
only one I had.
That was
I
the
don't
only
know.
one
halfway.
I was strongly in support of. The
We're
rest of
gonna
them,
get
I
real
went through
late.
and I said, yeah, well, that sounds okay.
Yeah, there was a,
I mean, do I personally not want the letter grades taken out? Yes, I do, but I don't,
Typical.
one person arguing
I mean, this
against
thing is huge,
the
so,
letter grades.
yeah, that was the only one that I had
Same.
concern with.
anybody else? Before I shut mine off?
I don't think so.
I didn't have any.
Nothing on the other document either, then?
There's the lottery and sports
Yeah.
gaming, no concerns
I mean,
with
I-
that.
Just wording.
The public funds, transportation laws.
The rest kind of seemed like they were not.
There were some deletions, but not big changes.
Yeah.
That was a big new one.
Yeah.
Well, oh, I see.
That's a good one. Go to the,
Oh, sorry.
go to the lottery.
Not really.
I don't want the
This-
camera on.
This was the original.
I'm not trying to do that.
I don't know what line it is.
The lottery one?
Lottery, yeah.
734.
Things that were submitted, and this is
Gambling.
how it was condensed in the handbook.
Yeah, about lottery funds using them. Is that the one?
735.
Yeah.
The Ohio Lottery
That you
Commission.
can't,
Let's,
These were the proposals,
Advertisements, promotions.
and this was the summary, how it's going to appear when they,
that you can't,
To vote on.
reduce public funding if you
Scroll that up a little
have
bit.
that.
oh, sorry.
That's all right. Stop right there.
We just add sports gaming betting, because that's
Yeah.
going to be legalized here soon.
Yeah, just, you can't replace public funding with that. You can add it to public funding. So I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Everybody good? Okay.
Yeah.
Shut it off. Side note, will we be getting, I've never gone to the conference, obviously. Will we be getting some kind of information on, how that works?
The app.
There's an app?
Yeah, and it's very thorough. You'll get a book too, but the app is really nice because you can pick sessions. It'll show you every segment of the
Yeah.
day, what sessions are available.
I received my book already.
No, I
and then
got
Did you do
that,
that?
but I meant like
Get registered.
eating and stuff, like I don't even know, what do we do for that, just
We kind of just
get an
meet.
email on that? Some
Yeah.
Mr.
point?
Heath is going to coordinate.
Am I the
Okay.
event
week
planner
full of
for this? Is
festivities
that how
for
that
our
works?
meal.
Listen,
He's got a grill in the back of his car that he's going to be.
C40 will send us an email
That's what I
about
was thinking, yeah.
lodging, where we're going to be.
That's it,
Yeah,
yeah.
some of the logistics, I know Missy's already got worked
Okay.
out, so we'll get something put together here.
Perfect.
I've got that on my notes here too, just to make sure that we've got all the
There's a-
details and
yeah.
Sounds good.
logistics worked out.
cool.
We also try to divide up, if it's possible, so let's say there's 5 different sessions, and 3 of us want to go to that session, we might peel off and pick up another one so we can
broader.
share that information, so we get a better cross-section of coverage on topics.
Okay.
And we do try to, where if we have, we don't have a presenter this year, do we?
Yes.
Yeah, there's,
What line now?
I forget the name.
In the
There's a
handbook, what
couple.
line number was that?
We have
I didn't
presenters or
get the
just
line
in the
number.
students?
413 through
Oh,
427.
no, we have people in student achievement, is that what you're saying?
Student achievement, I
No, we
know.
don't have a presenter.
We don't have any
27.
presenters, so.
No, I don't believe we have any presenters. We've got some students in the student
Because if
achievement
we
fair.
have presenters, we try to go.
So Missy will send out like the
Yes.
information and give us
Yeah,
one, okay.
and I'll put that on my notes here again too.
Thanks.
Yeah, last year, one of our teachers presented. It was very good. It's nice to see her.
anything else under capital conference?
Nope.
You know, I just wanted to say that, when we voted as a delegate, this is just kind of a point, I'm not sure everybody heard this story, but when we voted for the delegate, I misheard Mrs. Briner, and I thought that she had said, I'm not interested if someone else wants to go. And so I didn't realize that she was willing to go again, and, as she's our president, I have every faith that she would be able to carry out the duties of the delegate that she's done for many years. So I apologize for that. And when So it was certainly not a lack of faith when I didn't, throw my support there. However, I have every faith that Mr. Tuttle will be a great delegate for us. He has been on the board for many years, and I know that he's fair and thoughtful with it, and I support him as well. I just, I didn't want to make it seem like I wasn't, that I had lack of faith in our president. I don't, but I know Mr. Tuttle will be great.
I appreciate that.
No problem.
Ready to move on?
Yes.
Did you want to handle board policy?
Yes, so a couple things with board policies. Just as a starting point, I know last time we had conversation around Neola and doing a broad overview of our board policy manual and doing some adjustments and shifting potentially to that Neola platform. Bill and I have received the very lengthy contract. So we're reading through all of these pieces now just to make sure that the agreement is to our liking. I haven't noticed anything in my first perusal of it, but we're going to make sure we do our due diligence with the contract just to make sure that we're comfortable with it before we bring that to you. We are hopeful that we'll have that ready to go for our regular November 8th meeting, though. Unless there are any other comments, discussions.
I had a question.
Yeah.
So when we get the policies from Neola, will we be able to see what we had versus what we're going to get? And will we be voting on those, like, changes? Or is it just, let's swap these, here you go? Like, how do?
Are you talking like just from the initial, or when we get the updates, like once
The
we adopt the
initial, the
entire
initial.
manual?
I think we're gonna, yeah, I can answer
Go
that
ahead.
question. I think what's gonna happen is they're gonna give us their policies with the options for us to select.
Okay, and that would
Because
include.
he said rather than going through line by line, because he said it
Right.
would be not efficient and effective, it's because we were long overdue for a total overhaul, is to go through and read their policies and see what aligns to what our practice currently is, make those selections as we go through the first time.
And then would we vote on that as a board, or is it just switched out? Like, who does
No,
the-
everything, all that policy has to be board approved.
It will be
correct?
board approved,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So we'll see each policy that gets changed or gets added,
You'll see,
modified,
you'll see
corrected.
each policy.
Our version, existing, new version.
You'll see the proposed
proposed.
policy that we're proposing, because whether we have it or not.
And
Do
we
we have
have
any
access.
policies that we wrote specifically for us? We do, right?
Sure we do.
Yeah.
That'll be part of the.
So how will those be addressed?
That would be as we evaluate the policies per section. I'll just like use mine, for example. I'll go through, look at the ones that they have in their 800 section, which is the finance section, compare it to what we have in our finance section versus some other areas that I know financial policies have been sprinkled throughout. And just kind of review, make sure that we have, at a minimum, what we currently have, and see if there's anything else we'd want to add. And then kind of look at what we're doing, then look at what we have. But to more so kind of, okay, these are the standard policies that they think that every district should have for finance, going through and kind of looking through what we have there.
How about the other policies?
Like from
Discipline.
from all the
enrollment,
other
yes, all the
chapters,
other areas.
basically.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll go, excuse me, through the same process where, we'll take those templates that Neola gives us. If there are any policies that we currently have that are not included in there, we'll make sure that we address those, whether or not they need to be in there. We can get some legal input from them as well, say, here's a policy that we currently have.
I would find it hard to believe, Tom, from experience, that there's going to be something that's in the EOLA that,
Well, anything we may have that you say, well, let's strike that.
yeah.
We don't need that. Will we, collectively, the board members, have the opportunity to see those that are struck out?
Yes, because what happens when we send a draft, when you do it in the system, it shows what we selected and what we struck out.
we'll be able to see that
Yep.
system, line by line?
Yep.
One other question. Did we, I don't recall, did we consider OSBA's?
We did.
Okay.
And again, one of the issue with OSBA's policies is that they don't have the administrative guidelines,
Okay.
which I think are going to be vitally important as we move forward too, just from a practice standpoint.
Because we don't have that now. So
Correct.
it'd be a nice addition
Yeah.
to flesh out how to implement any of those policies.
And for us to do like an overhaul, let's say if we didn't go with Neola or OSBA, because I know the cost is 26,500 or so, then 2,500 a year, something like that. You don't have to quote me,
Yeah.
but I know that
No,
was
I
like
think
a
you're pretty
general.
close.
Close enough.
2,400, yeah.
Okay, so what's the cost difference if we were to stay with who we have and do like a whole review?
To be honest, I didn't even look.
Okay. It would just be interesting, like if it was 5,000 versus 26,000, I would like to see that difference, but
It doesn't have the administrative.
I understand that part of it. And I do like that the administrative guidelines are out there for the public to view, because then it's giving a little bit more of a dive in, here's the policy, but this is really,
Here's our
you know,
practice in that
what we're gonna,
detail.
right, what's attached to that policy. So I do like that aspect of it.
I thought it was also similar to if you had a small house and you added on to it. What would you do with that amount of square footage if you were building it all in a unified way? That's how I look at using Neola, is you're getting all of those policies and they're created in a cohesive group rather than a little bit here, a little bit there. In some policies, I mean, we've had updates from Pebble Wagner over the, they'll give us so that the language is out of whack, but, just kind of doing it so that there's consistency and it's well coordinated over all of those bigger topics makes a
Yeah, we
lot of
went through that
sense.
last
The administrative guidelines just seem like they add such another level of transparency. Like, this is the policy
I
and
like
this is
that.
how it's being applied. Right.
And another level of checks and balances too.
Right. That's why I do like that part of it.
Me too.
So I know we're not there yet, but when we get to the public participation policy that we put together, it looked like, because I compared it to like Chardon, which has Neola, and Riverside, it looks like a lot of that is already, so if we go with this, then we could easily, okay.
Yeah,
So I'm probably jumping ahead, but
but that's next.
I was just doing an intro.
You just gave the opening.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah.
So again, then, we will take one more look at the contract just to make sure we're comfortable with it. We'll have that ready to go for the November 8th board meeting then. Any other questions, concerns there? And again, thank you for the discussion on all that, too. I think this will be a big step for us. So public participation policy then, again, I shared with, and let me see if I can pop this up there real quick, too. Bill, no comments on how many tabs I have open, please?
You've never seen my laptop.
That's pretty impressive. That's a lot of
Hey.
tabs.
Same way.
Okay, good.
It's making me nervous.
That's how I know when I gotta get done.
Jeez, the
It's a
tabs
vir-
are
it's a
gone.
virtual sticky note.
And the sad thing is, I know exactly where everything is on here, too, and it's just like, oh, yeah, it's this one. So what I had shared with you is basically taking what our current board policy is, and I tried to mirror the way Neola does their updates as well, so that you could see that, and hopefully everybody out there can see this as well. So anything that's just in our regular black font is what our current board policy says. You can see that the first two paragraphs have stayed the same. Anything that would be deleted from our current policy is highlighted in red with a strike through. So really, those two paragraphs are things that either we just don't do that currently, or are encompassed in some of the new language that we'll see here shortly. So those two would be taken out. We have the regular pieces here that would stay, but then this is where we get into some of those new proposals that I had suggested at our last board work session. So taking out that initial part of B, and then putting in the green font as anything that is new language that would be brought to that particular policy. So again, that's the way Neola would present that to us so that we knew what those changes were. So again, letter B here now would read, the board limits public participation to residents of the school district, parents or guardians of a student in the district, employees in the district, individuals with a business ownership in the district, or elected/appointed public officials whose jurisdiction includes the school district. So that would be letter B in our policy. Attendees, letter C, attendees must register their intention to participate in public participation portion of the meeting prior to the start of the meeting so as to be recognized at the appropriate time by the presiding officer. D, individuals may not register others to speak during public participation. The only change here with our language is that instead of letter C, that's now going to be letter E for the next paragraph. The next paragraph, same thing, goes from letter D to letter F. We keep the first part of this. And then having the second part included in there. So any questions must be addressed to the presiding officer. That is crossed out. All statements shall be directed to the presiding officer. No person may address or question board members individually. Letter E is now letter G. Letter F is now letter H. And again, just pulling out that part that says, and has received written approval from the superintendent prior to the board meeting, and agrees to all of that other stuff. Just pulling out that piece. Why go through that step right now? Bill and I have talked about this too. Anytime we have a public meeting, we assume that it's going to be recorded in some fashion. So let's just pull that off the table, and whoever wants to show up and record our meetings can record our meetings. Letter G was just a little bit broad, and this kind of gives us a little bit more, and I think we talked about some of these pieces to the puzzle previously as well. This would be letter I. So the presiding officer has the right and power to control the meeting and may take, we used to have whatever actions are necessary to ensure an orderly meeting. This is just specific as to what those steps might be. And again, this is a pretty common thing in the majority of policies that are out there in the state right now. So those 4 or 5 actions, I think there were 5, just very specific as to, what our presiding officer is able to do. And then coming out of our conversations last time, a couple of the notes that we had there, and again, we don't have administrative guidelines yet, but one of the things that I would suggest for our practice here as a board, if a participant asks a question during their statement to the board in public participation, if we don't specifically have that written down, we can ask for clarification. And then prior to the next meeting, if I have some statements that I can make, we would try and address those concerns or those questions that were asked previously.
And the fact that an individual will have given a sense of what their concern is, it'll make it much easier to follow up if answers or information are needed.
Yeah, if you're able, you can answer it that evening
Yeah, if
Yeah.
it's something we're prepared to answer, obviously, we'll do that.
you may have-
If there's
have the
something a little
answer.
bit more complex, we want to make sure that we do our due diligence and research and have
Yeah,
a
you don't
good
wanna-
quality answer.
So
Want to be a complete answer.
the number 3, if you scroll down on the form, the part
Oh,
that talks, sorry.
To the form itself?
The form, yeah.
Okay, so before we jump into the form, are there any questions policy-wise?
I do have questions as well.
Okay.
So, do you want me to go on that
You want
first,
to go to
or?
the form first?
Sure, it doesn't matter.
So.
They're not crazy questions, I just have
Yeah,
some.
no worries. So the other thing that we included in here for you is just a sample of what that participation form might look like that is based off of what the policy reads. So just having the person have their name, and then what category from those 5 that we have, are they a resident, are they a parent or guardian, employee, individual of a business, with a business ownership, or an elected official, just so that we have that information. And then number 3, we had the topic to be discussed included in there. So that was the sample form. All right.
So the first one I just had, just a couple questions. So the public participation form, I know I had emailed you about, I would prefer for the form to, for the topic specifically, to be an optional item, because I feel like if somebody, forgets, they have 5 different things that they want to speak on, and they forget the 5th one, and then they go to speak, and then we start gaveling them, because they switched that 5th topic and it's not on their form, I feel like that's just a bit restrictive. Also, if, I've seen other board meetings where they do this, where you have to sign up in the beginning, but there are people who may sign up and then say pass, because they sign up because they know something's on the agenda that they're, wanting to see what we say, or,
And it gets addressed, so they don't want to.
Yeah, so they don't want to talk about it, or something is brought up during the regular meeting and they want to speak at the end, but they don't really know if they're going to speak or not. I think it's just a little restrictive. I understand the purpose of it, but for those kind of different scenarios, I wouldn't want to tell somebody, well, you didn't put it on the form, so you can't speak, I don't want to make it hard.
I don't think it says that you can't, but I think it's helpful to help an individual speaker to kind of frame their topic of concern. Because I would even like to add, if you have a possible solution that you would like to propose, I would be delighted to have that kind of feedback. And I think it also helps with follow-up. So, so-and-so has a few minutes and speaks. If you have 5 topics and you could squeeze them into 3 minutes, go for it. But, if a person added something in addition, I'm not as concerned about that, but I'd like to have some, chance to kind of know what they hoped to address.
So maybe,
How would you know that? You're not going to get the slip of paper that's going to say the
No,
topic.
Bill's going to have it.
But he's not going to announce that to you
No.
and to us.
No, but it
So it's gonna
helps
be-
with the follow-up, I think.
I think Annie has a good point there. We don't want to make it so restrictive. What we could just do is, in practice, and I don't know, this would be an administrative guideline, that, as long as they sign up, you could kind of outline what topics you're discussing, but we wouldn't stop them like, no, you didn't say this. I wouldn't imagine that we would.
so maybe we could put.
We could
optional-
Just put the word optional on there.
Optional on there.
And
that way-
then
or
include
have
the
checkbox.
possible solution with optional
Yeah, I'd
on
be
there
okay
as
with
well.
that. Yeah, both
And-
optional.
And again, I think in my response to you too, Annie, the reason that topic was included on a lot of the registration forms that are out there is they also, in those board meetings, had a cap, which we're not including in our proposals right now. That way, if a certain number of people signed up to speak in public participation and the time limit had expired, it allowed the administration to be able to respond to that question or that topic to that particular person after the meeting, even though they weren't able to bring that up in the public speaking portion. So again, proposals then would be to put the word optional here for the topic to be discussed, and then putting down maybe a number 4 with possible solutions with the word optional next to that as
Okay.
well.
And we understand that we're not limiting them to the topics that they wrote down.
Yes, it's just optional.
And
If
that's-
they- even if
I
they
can
list
put
it,
that in the
yeah.
administrative
Even if they
guidelines.
listed it, we
Solution.
wouldn't stop them.
Solution to,
Whatever the
Whatever
topic
they're
or
bringing up.
concern that they're bringing up. Because I've gotten actually a couple of really good emails here this week from community members that brought up a concern, and then, again, it was around transportation, and said, but what about this or this? And I'm like, well, ironically enough, I've got 2 meetings that are coming up this week where transportation is included in the agenda, and I said, I'm going to lead with that for both of those, so it'll be a good conversation to have.
well, as long as we don't edit or remove people's comment, that we have 3 people speaking to the same topic.
Right. Right.
I think one of the reasons why declaring a topic was a good idea was to stop the back and forth. You know, you want a person to have a,
Thought we talked about this last time.
that was why that was proposed, so that you don't have somebody who's diverting their attention to others in the audience who may have spoken or are there or whatever, that they're, you know, addressing the board, the president specifically.
But we
that it-
have that rule.
But this would reaffirm.
We're speaking to that, right? In what the presiding officer can do to
True.
that
True.
aggressive
but
conversation.
That's where if we have just, I think just the topic stated, and it doesn't have to be limiting, but just to give the person a chance to kind of gather their thoughts so they can share what they want us to know. That's a good thing.
I understand the reason for it. I would like it to say optional so that
Yeah,
we're not.
I agree.
That's fine.
And
then I-
again, we can see how this works as we're going through, and if there's need to, as Tom mentioned earlier, if there's a need to adjust the practice or adjust the wording, we can certainly do that at a later time.
Agree.
It's a good
Yeah.
first step, though.
And I think, I had a couple other
Yeah,
questions.
please.
So I know the line where it says it's repetitive or obscene, I think from our previous conversation that we all had as a board, we kind of wanted to make sure we were all on the same page as to what does that look
What does
like?
that
Because I think
mean?
we all have different ideas of obscene, and I think having a.
Offensive.
Or offensive, right.
Right.
So, but offensive to who? Because we're 5 people. Something that offends you may not offend me, something that offends me may not offend you. So I think we need to have a discussion about what does that really look like in practice. Repetitive, I mean, I don't know, I don't really get why that's in there, because I don't care if people repeat themselves 3-4 times, as long as they're not being obscene while doing it. I think that's fine.
It'd be 3 people speaking to the same thing. So
We're
you're going
not
to stop the
limiting
third
that.
one?
We're not
Yeah,
limiting,
so we're
yeah,
not
no.
So
limiting that.
repetitive is
Would we
Doesn't apply to
consider
us.
striking that?
I would strike it out, yeah.
That's
not
fine.
applicable.
So actually, let me just go here.
The other thing that's going to be difficult about that is freedom of speech, you know, and again, it speaks to what's offensive to one may not be to another.
And do we have the word offensive in here?
No,
I know we have the
it's
word obscene.
Obscene. So I guess we need to talk about what does obscene look like? Because, I mean.
Assume that's-
Can we list all the words?
Right, I mean, but
George
seriously,
Carlin
like,
had
there's
seven.
some, because we have to stay consistent. We can't, gavel somebody and say, you can't have this, but then
Sorry.
somebody else can,
Yeah, right.
talk to, we have to be consistent with whatever we decide is obscene. We have to apply it universally.
Yeah.
And I've been getting it from both sides. So
how could we
I'm not making either side happy. You know, I get the finger pointed at both sides. You should have warned that person, and you should have warned that person, and you're playing favorites with this one, and you're not with that one, and I'm.
Yeah. And again, to my comments last time too, and this is not something where we can leave, Mary Briner out to dry on this. I think we need to hold everybody accountable around the table, and if there's some sort of sign or word that we say, hey, can we stop for a second, have a conversation about, the direction that this public participation is heading, and move from there. And I think it needs to be all of us around the table holding each other accountable to it, too.
Then we've got the audience yelling out, and then, it just,
So could we say, make comments that use obscene language
Or, I mean, what if we list?
constitute a true
Obscene
threat?
is too.
again,
obtuse.
I
You
think it's been
can't
more
define it.
offensive
That's
than
obscene.
obscene. That's
Right.
what I'm hearing.
Well, I
And
guess
again, who's
if-
offended?
I think aggressive language, something like that.
Okay, how do you
Aggressive
define
ones.
aggressive?
Loud,
Okay.
offensive,
So if
aggressive,
someone is being loud.
deemed by the
you
presiding
stop
officer
them.
or the sergeant at arms.
Okay, so you've got a person who's talking quietly and controlled, but they're offensive. And that's okay?
What
I'm-
about if
I'm-
we make rules around race, religion,
So
you know?
race.
Race, religion, gender, anything that's, I mean, we would have to target it, but I guess I wouldn't want anybody going up there and saying, you know,
So if someone reads a Bible verse, is that allowed or no?
well, see, that's tough
Because
because
that's
that's freedom of
religion.
speech, and that's, I mean, like
See?
targeting.
This is going to be the hard part.
Yeah, I mean, like targeting people. So if you get somebody up there who's going to use language that's targeting somebody's race or saying, you know, if you are of this sexual orientation, you're this, and applying a label to them, I don't think that's great. I think both ways it's wrong, whether it's race, religion, you know, if you're Christian, you're this. If you're Muslim, you're this. I don't think that kind of speech is helpful. Now, can we completely stop it? I don't know, but I think there should be some kind of decorum, right? Where we say, excuse me, you know, Mr. Whoever, can you please use language that is, you know, I don't know, appropriate for this
setting.
meeting and this setting, you know, because we don't want our meetings to get out of control, but they have been, and on, you know, many occasions. So I don't know that this is going to fix that with the way it's worded. I don't know if there's different language we can use, or, because it is hard, and to Mary's defense, I think that would be very tough to decide who to say stop and who not to. Especially if you know that person too, it makes it even more difficult, so, I don't know.
There's aggressive speaking,
Now,
the
see-
strong authoritative.
You're
But
talking to
there's some
tone.
that shout, they yell, they scream, they point their fingers. They need to be told, take a time out.
See,
Bring it
tone-
down,
I
bring it
don't think
down.
tone has anything to do with it.
No, some shout at us.
I don't think that matters.
Yeah, it does. They're supposed to be talking to the presiding officer, not to each one of us, the presiding officer, and yelling.
Or
See, I think that's
demanding
gotten
a
better.
response,
I think that's gotten better.
demanding a response when it was made
But
clear.
we can't wait for things to get better. When it happens, that's when it has to be addressed. If we don't speak to it then it continues.
We've also got
The speakers need to be told what we will tolerate. We want their input. We want them to speak to the presiding officer.
Right.
And don't ask questions of all the other board members. And don't ask Mr. Heath or Mr. Wade questions. It's to speak to the presiding officer.
Right. I know.
Take their
There's still
questions,
issues
write
like
it
that.
down, ask their name, get the questions, we'll move forward on that.
I agree.
But the yelling at us is not the way we should conduct our meetings.
Right.
We don't yell at each other.
We do have
And we don't yell at the audience.
And we still
We
have
res-
audience
We expect respect.
shouting out.
So Tom, do you have any, how would you word it?
How do we put that into words?
The presiding officer is responsible to address those who get, whatever you want to call it, out
That's
of
what we're
line,
talking about.
loud,
So that would be obscene,
offensive.
we're agreeing that that would be obscene. Because I also think if people don't yell, but they're using racial slurs or labeling people for their, you know, race, religion, gender, whatever, the scenario, I think that's,
I think the easy one to start with is if they bring up a specific student or staff member.
that too.
Right. I mean,
Right.
that-
needs to
Anytime that happens, that'd be a prime example of something that we would shut down immediately.
And that would apply to,
And that's
That's our
actually
class
already,
rule.
that was
already
already in our
have that in
current
there,
policy,
yeah.
yeah.
and that wouldn't even be by specific name. They don't need to name the person, but if they like insinuate, like
Yeah.
the person who teaches this, or the person who is a fourth grader in Hopkins. or-
Because the concerns that should be brought should be more general, right? If you have a specific concern, you should be contacting the appropriate district
Exactly.
administrator to get it
Chain of
addressed
command.
Right,
there.
the chain of command.
And then if it doesn't get addressed, there's steps in place to go up the chain of command. And then if it doesn't get addressed by the superintendent and the CFO, the person has the right to make a complaint to the board president. I mean, we have policies in place for that.
I like that.
But to your point that you've had here tonight, the question is going to be tone and content.
Right.
Free speech, though.
Because each
enters into
president,
it.
yeah, and each president's going to interpret that differently.
Right.
Yes.
And we've already had people making assertions that, they have the right to say what they want to say because of a free speech. So that's another wrinkle.
They can,
Well-
but there could be a consequence
Like
that they
shut off your
might be shut
microphone.
down, they could be asked to leave, I mean, there's, again, we kind of talked about it at the meeting, I'm losing track of the meetings, but, did you see what I did there?
Nice,
Yeah,
nice.
you're welcome. I'll remember next Tuesday when we have another one. The, that there, there's things that
That's
we
the only
can,
other thing that
the
I
board has to be
follow.
able to conduct their business.
Okay.
And if someone is not abiding by the rules, the presiding officer is the one who
Harassing could
controls
be.
that.
Yeah.
But I think the piece of it with regards to other members who feel that something has been crossed, saying Madam President or Mr. President, and interrupting the speaker to catch the attention of the board president, to Craig's piece of, we're all in this together, I think is going to take that, because you're trying to, it's like managing a classroom, right? Like, we've kind of got a classroom that's a little bit disruptive, and we got to kind of get it back under control, and it's going to take the entire board to kind of, to do
Stand
that.
together.
So we could, if any one of us feel like the speaker is speaking in a harassing or obscene manner, we can say, Madam President, I feel like this speaker is speaking in an obscene manner. Or like-
You could say, I think this is something that we're trying to address or
Avoid.
discuss per our new policy, because again, this isn't going to happen at the earliest until January,
Right.
right? So it could be any of the five of you, right? So it'd be, this is something isn't this something we're trying to control?
We could certainly implement the spirit of this without a
Right,
formal
without-
policy.
That's what I was thinking, that's why this is.
So we don't have to
important.
wait until January for this to change, because it's really not a change. It's
Right.
just a clarification of what we've wanted to do. Because I think of
The enforcement of the rules, you mean?
Right.
specifically, yeah.
Correct. It's been very difficult because our community's reputation, the students that we serve in our district, our, friends and neighbors, are observers of all of it. And because we keep our meetings posted online, people can revisit those. And sometimes it's been a very unflattering light.
Well, let's not cast the blame on everybody who sits in the audience.
No.
Let's accept some of the responsibility. When we don't respond to them,
Yes.
when they ask questions, and we don't get back to them the next month. So the one issue kept coming back every month. And she got aggressive. She'd storm out and storm back in. And furthermore, this is what I believe. I can't see anybody's face out in the audience. And they may see me because the light's on me and everything, and I'm smiling. But there's some people out there that perhaps if they sat near us, just like they're doing today, and if they speak, we'll see their face. Not that they'll feel, oh, I can't let them see my face. It's like, that brings the conversation to personal and not, what is it, 100 feet to the
Yeah.
speaker's mic, and they got this tiny little head, and I can't see. What
We
is
are
that?
moving back to Paradigm though, right, as of
Yes.
January?
Yes.
So
We need to be
We're
in
gonna have to
paradigm.
talk about that. Well, and
Yeah.
the other thing is, some people you can't hear, especially depending on how loudly they're speaking, if they're
Right.
speaking into the microphone. So I don't always hear every word that's spoken
Right.
either.
I don't either. I miss,
So I can't
I go back and
always
watch
hear
things.
every obscene comment that's made.
You can't hear. I'm seeing.
I think we did talk about this last month, and you brought it up again, Tom, and I think it's worthwhile to bring it, the need to address, like, somebody to say to the person, I heard your question, we have your question down as this. For Craig and I to be allowed to answer questions that fit to our purview then, like, in my previous life, it was very rare that I didn't address and interact with the community when I was sitting at the table. We have a different decorum here. I understand that, and I can appreciate that, but I think at a minimum, acknowledging the question and saying that we'll get an answer back and summarizing those questions at the end by somebody, and then Craig and I addressing them at the next meeting, at a minimum, is a good first step.
And another line could be there, a suggestion. If they have a question, you put in there, what's your question? If they've thought it out prior to it, let's put a line down there. You want them to give us the topic? Ask, question, optional,
that would be a
Give
good
us-
idea.
give us your question. What's your-
Topic/question.
It
And then
might-
it's written down, and we got a form.
It might be nice to have an email address or a
Right.
phone number for
So we
things
can
that
follow
could
up
be
with them.
immediately
Well,
followed up.
don't we have it though, that we're gonna, at the next board meeting, we're gonna answer the questions in the beginning?
Yeah,
Well,
but
some
there,
people might want an email follow-up or a phone call.
yeah, it could be.
So I can
something.
throw
Put it
email
in
on
So we
writing
would do
as an
both
optional.
then? Because
It's
I
possible.
like doing both. If we're gonna do that, I think it needs to be said in the public, because while people are listening to other people's questions, they may be like, oh yeah, me too. And then they're gonna repeat it the next month, maybe they're gonna speak then on it, because they don't know the answer.
But,
So,
for example, the flag and the pledge question that
Right.
came up, being able to respond to that to everybody that was sitting in that last meeting would be appropriate
Yeah.
as well. So,
some
name
questions
an
might be
email
more personal.
potentially, and then topic and question also included, but again, an optional piece there.
Question is a separate line item.
So topic/question to be discussed?
Topic, or leave it blank, and what's your do you have a question?
Or
Or
question.
topic, I think it could be both.
Yeah,
You know, because
whatever.
you might be
Topic.
making a statement.
Topic
Trying to
and
get
or
it to your
question.
little piece of paper, too.
Yeah.
It would have had to been like
2-inch
Six
script.
font,
3-inch
5 font.
I did have
Now
a
we're
question
full-
though, because we were
full page.
talking, the last meeting, we kind of talked a little bit about an electronic form as well. If people are like running late, or
Yeah.
I gotta drop my kid off at 7, I'll be at a meeting at, 7:15. And they, want to talk about something. Well, actually, I
They
just
can
thought of
email.
something else though, too. Is this for on-agenda items or at the end on everything?
Well, and again, I didn't put it in, or include that in here, and if
'Cause we're gonna call 'em
we want
up,
to do that
right?
and actually have, yeah,
can
if we
divide
still have the two sections of public
Yeah.
participation, or if we just want to go to one and have it all done at the beginning, because then it could be on or off. I've seen, well, my 3 previous districts just had one, and it was on any item that was on or off the agenda.
Because I think we need to clarify
Or
that.
if we're going to keep the 2, we would go ahead and have that on the participation form as well. But again, that could be.
Yeah, my
open for
preference is
discussion.
both sessions.
Same,
Keep both?
yeah,
The open being on topics on the agenda.
the beginning.
Speak at the end. You have a question on some other issue, like, when does the snow get removed? No.
So maybe
Clear
I'll
the
put
parking
that
lots.
in as number 3, bump topic/question to number 4, and then number 5, possible solution. And have those last 2 pieces as optional.
And then if somebody is running late, they can email, is that what you were saying?
Yeah, you can, I mean, you
Yeah.
can
Can we have-
sign, you can do the form, we can put the form on the website,
I like that
So
idea.
that they
Like the
can,
form on the
Yeah.
website, because then it's standard.
Right.
It'll be the same information.
correct.
Because
Then
in
we
an
can
email,
print
they
that
won't.
out and have it
Yeah.
at the meeting for anyone who doesn't want to do that, then they can get there early
Yeah.
at 7, before 7 o'clock.
Perfect.
Are we putting a phone number on here too, in case we needed to?
Email
Or is it
address
just
or phone
email?
number if you wanted.
Yeah.
Contact.
Best way can be
too.
contact.
And
Yeah.
what's the sequence that we're gonna, is it random? We're gonna call people up randomly?
I'm going to get a big,
You're gonna get, yeah.
Bingo.
Pull it out.
We'll do alphabetical, so everybody will put A in their first name.
Yeah.
A, Sam.
So just
A,
random, we're
Gina.
just gonna
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
okay,
yeah,
all right, cool.
I'll mix them up.
Craig, under parent or guardian, did you consider putting in what school their kids are at?
We hadn't put that down. I know that was, I believe, part of one of the,
Yeah.
if I go back to what our language was.
Kind of couching on that, what was the thought with student's name, student's address? Is that just to confirm that the student's in the district, or?
Well, and again, for those parents of students that don't live in the district, so that we know that the student is actually one of ours.
Split parenting.
That is a good question, though, because some people might be a little
They might
nervous
be
to
a
put
little
down their
nervous to
student's
put down their
name.
child. So, because right now, we don't have them stand up and say,
Right.
you know,
Right.
my daughter is Hallie and
Right.
Willow. We just say they're at Memorial in the high school. So,
So we could get rid of student's name. Do we
Maybe
still want
just-
the student's
I think
address
the
just to make
address
sure
is
that it's
fine.
here?
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
you put the school instead of the name?
Oh,
I like
yeah,
that.
we could
The
put
school
the
instead.
student's school.
yes. That way, we know that they're in the school, because that's what we're asking them to do now, say what school the kids are
Mhm.
at.
Got it?
Makes sense.
In I-1, that rises to a pretty high level and would allow pretty aggressive speech if it didn't seem to constitute a true threat, meaning seriously harmed by speaking. You know, I mean, that's
Yeah,
like,
it's
wow.
it's,
I mean, I would say that when I look at this right now, as we've taken out repetitive, it says obscene, and then true threat.
I would just say
We wouldn't
threatening.
stop anyone yet, because, you know, so if we're trying to control comments at all, or the feel of the comments, I'm not sure that we do it with the way it's written right now.
Yeah, I thought, you know, even something,
Well, harassing language, that's a.
yeah, so,
Well, harassing's repetitive.
so that's the other
So, like,
piece to the
I
puzzle
mean,
that.
if you look at the true definition of harassment, like, you have to
Yeah.
do it repeatedly.
same with bullying. You're gonna
Well, I
do
thought
it.
bullying was, but harassment was different.
No, they're all.
They're both the same,
you have to-
repetitive?
Like, it wouldn't just be one time that you would say.
Because you could be obscene or just a jerk, right? That
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean I'm harassing, but if I come every day and I do the same
Even
thing
if
to
you
you,
dial it back, yeah.
say with a smile, it still could be harassing.
Yeah.
About aggressive, I mean,
Aggressive would be.
aggressive
I think
seems
that's what
fitting.
Tom was trying to get at too,
Yeah.
is with the
Yeah.
tone and kind of.
Aggressive, because that would be content or tone.
So do we
you
get
know?
rid of the word harassing here? That
Aggressive.
That was a different district that used that language.
I'm not saying I'm not
No,
against harassing,
aggressive.
but there was questions about the word repetitive, and I just,
Yeah, that's a good point.
Harassing or aggressive.
Did we talk, we spoke about it, but I'm not sure where we landed. Like limiting if someone was addressing concerns about a specific staff member or a specific student.
Yeah, and that's in our current policy language, so if we
Yes.
look up, find where that is again. Yeah, it's right in here.
I mean, if people have concerns, we want to hear them, but
Yeah.
there's a different format for that, I guess.
Yeah,
is my
other
point.
channels provide for board consideration and disposition of legitimate complaints involving individual employees of the district.
No, it says, or any person connected with the school system. So would that be treated the same way? Would, you know, if people are writing in about somebody who's connected with the school system, we would then listen and respond back to them, like we would if it was a, you know, employee of the district, so that it's not during public commentary?
That's the way it reads right now.
And if we don't respond, what's their next step then? To ask?
So how is that defined, a person connected
Yeah.
that's not employed? Who would that be?
Students or
Volunteer.
A
parents.
student, okay.
Volunteers?
Or volunteer, okay,
Um,
okay.
I think it should be more explicit with student.
Yeah. More what?
More explicit and actually say student rather than person associated with the district. If we're going to say personnel, it
Yes.
seems like we'd say
Yeah.
student.
Staff or students.
So in here then, complaints about school personnel.
Personnel
yeah.
or students.
Or committee member, yeah.
But see, I don't know, gosh, this is like.
It's a hard one.
But you're not complaining about a student. You should, we're saying wholeheartedly, you shouldn't talk about a specific student, right? I
Or
mean,
or teacher,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like, you shouldn't
No
use
specific
you shouldn't be
names.
specific. If you come to the board to speak at a board meeting, it should be a general concern about staff as a whole, or the handbook, not that I saw Tyler Wade walking around with short shorts on. You know what I mean? Like, it's, I have a concern that the handbook's not being enforced.
Right. Otherwise, they should email.
Correct.
Not discuss it.
And that's
Yeah.
a chain of command thing too. It shouldn't be, start with the superintendent or CFO and work your way down. It should be the principals, the teacher, the principal, and from there.
Again, because, yeah, the public comment section is for the community to speak about issues that they have, or anything really related to the school system, right? I mean, so if there's specific concerns, they should be doing that in an appropriate chain of command.
And so if it's somebody who's connected to the school system, but not employed by the school system, and people are emailing in, then we would have to respond. Otherwise, they have no other chain of command because they can't come and speak about it at the board meeting.
Well, that would always have been true though. So let's say the
Yeah, I guess
crossing
that
guard
kind of goes
was.
to that situation, like let's say I emailed Mr. Wade, the high school principal, about a concern, and then he didn't, so then I'd go to Mr. Hammond, or then I'd go to Mr. Heath, and then if Mr. Heath doesn't address it, then it's an issue with Mr. Heath, then he or she would then go to the board president, per our policy, as we know, and say, I'd like to discuss this with the board in executive session.
So then even somebody who's connected to the school, if they're not getting their answers via email, they would be able to bring it up to us and request an executive session
If
with
it's,
them?
well, it has to rise to a complaint against this.
Right, I'm saying
CFO
if we
or
are not
treasurer, yeah.
responding to emails
Yeah.
about it, okay. Fair enough. I had one other question. The way that this reads, if you go all the way up to the top, and then the first paragraph, and it says, so that the board may have an opportunity to hear comments, suggestions, and concerns of the public in an effort to inform citizens in advance of matters to be considered at the Board of Education meetings. Advance notice of all regular and special meetings will be provided to the community media. It's not really clear in here if we allow public commentary at special meetings or not. And I know there are some places that, like Chardon, I don't know if you know, Maggie, but Chardon does allow public participation at special meetings only on agenda items. So whatever we decide, I think should be clarified in
Yeah,
here.
we should be clear.
We could say regular. That would be our monthly meetings, and then that eliminates special meetings. If we wanted to add it, we can always do that, but it wouldn't be an expectation. Would that be better?
I wouldn't mind it, but I just want it to be clear, you know, so that the
Yeah,
public
please.
understands.
Get rid of the word "the."
When we have it and when we don't.
At regular, monthly, because then it says what it is.
should say regular
Just say regular.
meetings.
Because
Because
regular
everything
meetings.
else
are-
is a special.
Correct. Anything that's not put on at the organizational meeting, prearranged, is not considered a regular meeting.
Under our administrative guideline, it says, we're talking about answering the questions, which I think is great, but it does say informs the participant that answers will be provided in the opening statements by the superintendent at the next regular board meeting. Will to may, just in case we can't answer it in one. I mean, I don't know. Of course, we would try. We would do our best to get it as soon as possible, but
Could
if
you
we
say a
can't-
subsequent instead of the next?
Yeah, I think that's better, because I want
Yeah.
people to know we will eventually.
will do it.
Yeah,
We
so I
will.
think that sounds.
Wait for information.
Right,
But sometimes you
Right.
can't get it
right away. Yeah.
right away. I mean, you should be able to in a month, but I just,
Yeah, subsequent is right.
I think that's good,
I
yeah.
like subsequent.
Yep,
And even remove opening statements just by the superintendent at the next, or at a subsequent
Right.
meeting.
So we'll get an answer,
So get rid of May too.
and we know it will be as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Would
The
you want it
answers.
as an alternate if it is
Answers will
something
be
that's
provided
quite
by the
specific
superintendent
that somebody has
at a
raised, that
subsequent
you
board
might
meeting.
answer, you may contact the person individually rather than at the next board meeting, so that the speaker would either receive a reply or the superintendent would address it at the next regular board meeting?
I like it just at the next regular board meeting, because I think, and especially when we have large crowds in our audience, if one person gets up there with a question, 5 other people could think about it, and then they won't hear the answer, and then maybe we have 5 people speaking about it at the next meeting.
Sure. Now, if the question is inappropriate because it's, relates to something that we, like a specific staff or a specific student, something like that, we would not answer that.
Right. But they also wouldn't be able to even ask the question then, right? So.
Not to
if they
say
were
that it
bringing
won't
up-
happen, though.
Right, right.
So,
Yeah. Fair enough.
All right, good. Do we, real quick, the word aggressive in here, are we keeping that?
Yeah.
The word obscene was the problem.
And I would take out true. So
Yeah.
it make comments that are harassing, aggressive,
A threat.
or
Constitute a
Or
threat, yeah.
constitute a
obscene or
threat?
constitute a threat. And I wouldn't even add all that other stuff, just a threat. That's it, you're done.
Take that all out right there?
I don't think you need it.
I don't think you need it either. A threat is a threat.
Yeah, because that could be.
We good with taking that out?
Yes.
So just interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's session, requesting the microphone to be turned off if, or when, I don't know if you want to say, if they make comments that are harassing, aggressive, obscene,
have
or
made
constitute a
comments.
threat.
Sounds good.
We like it?
And as Tom pointed out, we'll see how that impacts our meetings, if they get better.
All right, so I will get this resent to everyone. I'll do the marked up version here, and then I'll also do a cleaned up version that would be the actual new policy, so that you have both of those, so that we see what that draft was and what we've changed.
Sounds good.
So that we can
Thank you for
discuss
doing
that for first reading.
Are we covering the part where someone would call out racial issues, religious beliefs, and things like that in their conversation when they should be speaking to the the president of the board? Is that language clear to speak to the president of the board?
I think that's
Labeling
it.
people in the meeting, accusing people of being
Well, I think
religious,
that
or
that's
whatever you
where
want
we
to call it,
came-
calling out their religion?
Yeah, that was, if you look at letter F right in here, Tom, I think this is
That
where we're
covered?
trying to get that.
But someone could be talking to the, I think what Tom's
saying the
saying is that
content.
you could be talking to the board
Maybe.
president saying
Okay.
they, or those,
In general, labeling of people in the community, or even in the room, in the building, at the meeting, while it appears to be addressing the board, the president, but it really isn't, and calling out people in the meeting. Where does that fall, Ian? Say,
because we've heard that a number of
that's
times
inappropriate.
from both sides.
Correct.
So
Yeah, so
under
we might need to-
I-1.
Calling out people for being homophobes, xenophobes, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, it's labeling. I mean, we don't want people being labeled based on their sexual orientation either, you know? I think we need to be unanimous if that's the direction we go with not labeling.
In addition.
Demeaning conversation, demeaning speech, when it should,
Right, in addition.
speaking to the president of the board, not to the,
Attendees.
Often it's
Attendees.
not the person at the microphone either. It's people in the audience, someone's talking at the microphone and you have someone else yell out like, you know, you're going to hell, or you're a sinner, or something like that.
Right.
So that kind of a comment, we don't really have any language. We have things about people at the microphone, we don't have
Disorderly behavior.
disorderly
demeaning to
conduct.
others,
Yeah, because I don't think that
to
would
other
be, I don't like
attendees,
that
or
either.
people not in
Right.
attendance.
So attendees.
So do we include that here under number I-1? Where we could add something to the end of this, where it
Or
comments
maybe
that constitute
two.
a
Or
threat?
Maybe two, because it's request them to
The
stop speaking or
decorum.
leave because they are yelling.
Yeah,
They're,
two.
they're not at the microphone, we can't terminate their session.
Is there nothing in there anymore about people speaking out?
Yeah. Yeah, because this doesn't necessarily,
Number 2, yeah, would be, I think that's the place
yeah, it doesn't
for it.
necessarily
Any
indicate that it's
individual.
specifically the person
kind of
that's
under
at the
two.
microphone speaking.
Attendee, any individual.
Anybody,
Including
yeah.
attendees.
Not showing respect for the forum would be asked to leave or remove.
Yeah. I think it's
Yeah,
addressed.
if they're
Sexual
just, if they're calling out
antagonistic.
of turn, the person at the
Some words
microphone
like
has
that.
has the turn. So
Kind of
here-
under two.
Inciting aggression or rhetorical
So,
aggression.
yeah, Tom, for yours, where would that fit? For what you said, if it is the speaker and they are using, you know, language that's labeling groups of people,
I think
That
two
would be
addresses
Yeah, I
harassing,
think this-
aggressive, obscene. That would fit in number 1, because that would be all the speakers.
And again, on here in number 2, you know, if we say request an individual in attendance to stop speaking and/or leave the meeting when that person does not observe reasonable decorum or is disruptive to the conduct and/or orderly progress of the meeting.
Yeah.
You know, again, that would be something around the table here that, you know, we would need to hold each other accountable. And again, Tom, to your point a little bit earlier too, if we bring this back to Paradigm and we're in closer proximity, and that'll be a little bit easier to monitor.
for sure.
Um,
And it has empathy, like when you're looking somebody in the
Right.
eyes, it's so different than
Right.
when you're a football field away.
Right.
And it could just fall under obscene, which is the language we have.
In number 1.
Name calling. I don't know. It's,
We could say that.
when they move off the target of what they're speaking about, and then they broaden it,
We've got to be careful with.
people who wear
name calling.
glasses, you know, like, what do you have to say about me?
If we add name calling, though, we really, I mean, we'd need to take a look at some of the books too that we're putting in the classroom, because some of them label groups of people for their beliefs, so I don't know if that's what we want to do.
For example, calling, well, I guess you don't want to get too down in the weeds, because if you get down in the weeds, then there's going to be something you've left out.
Well, and it's difficult because all labels aren't bad, you know.
Name calling.
Name calling.
You could
I
suspend.
guess part of it is
the-
address the comments to the president.
Yeah,
And if they're not being addressed to the presiding officer, you shut it down.
I was going to say, if.
Shut it down.
Yeah,
Turn the
you-
mic off.
You could just, but you could terminate the public remarks if people won't respect the forum.
What I don't want to happen, though, is like, if Tom says, you know, Madam President, I feel like this is obscene, and then, you know, Mary doesn't feel like it's obscene, or vice versa, like, us arguing is not going to be a good look either. You know, so we have to be respectful of each other's opinions and know that, you know, if one person says it, we don't want to rebuttal that person and say, oh, well, it's really not offensive, or, you know, we just have to be very mindful.
Well, in a situation like that, what I suggest is that we kind of take a temperature of the whole board. Because if one person stops me and says they have a problem, then I expect everybody to chime in and give their opinions
Oh, gosh, Mary.
and
By then
decide.
I
it's
know,
too
this is
late.
going to turn into,
Well, it can't just be between me and one other board member. That's when everybody has to take responsibility.
Well, the policy speaks to the fact if someone doesn't agree with the presiding officer's decision, or in this case, a lack thereof, a motion and a second and a vote could be taken.
Yeah, it's in a different policy, but yeah.
Because that's, I mean, we talked about that one a couple work sessions ago as well.
Right.
So if someone doesn't agree with Mary not enforcing the rules, they could speak up, say, I would motion that we terminate this person's speech because they're not abiding by the decorum that we've established in multiple work sessions. Maggie could second, then you gotta take it to a vote, and then that would be enough to shut that person down.
Because in number four, I4, it calls for recess or adjournment to another time when the lack of public decorum so interferes with the orderly conduct of the meeting as to warrant such action.
Because there could be a time when the president does that and the rest of the board doesn't agree.
I would hope that we could have some respect for each other's concerns if a statement's being made, that we would maybe use the warn. And we would say, you know, so to the thing we just said, if you are not calling something out and you feel it's offensive, and you say, you know, I'm offended by this, that our presiding officer would then say, you know, to the person speaking, you know, we do have a concern on our board. This would be your first warning. And if, you know, we have another,
Seems reasonable.
you know, so that we're not arguing at
Oh,
the
right.
table
That would look terrible.
over who
yeah. That's a good
who
idea.
feels it's offensive and not. And
And
then if it
that's-
happens again, then it's shut down.
I like that.
And that's a good option, too.
Okay.
So number 4 would be apply a warning.
We've got it in number
It's in
Yeah, we
there,
have it
yeah.
in number 1. We said that we can interrupt, warn,
Oh,
or
gotcha.
terminate. So
So just utilizing that verbiage
Yeah, that's a good
as
idea.
Sounds
as
good.
one of our pieces of practice as we go through this. Okay, so we've got that. I've got the aggressive. The other thing, yeah, as we were talking, yeah, all statements shall be directed to the presiding officer. No person may address or question board members, administrators, or other audience members individually.
And a warning could be offered there, too.
Yeah, because that then dips into letter I immediately as well.
I would just say other audience members. I wouldn't say individually. Because a lot of times it's not individual, a lot of times it's collective.
Collective.
Or other persons.
Very So no person may address or question board members, administrators, or other audience members.
Again, if
Just
they
all
want
the
to do that
statements
in
are directed
their
to
own
it.
time,
Mhm.
outside of a board meeting, they have the right to do that.
Yeah.
But we're not saying you can't, we're saying
Yeah,
this is not the
yeah,
appropriate
just
time
not
for
at
it.
this time.
Yeah, it's not the forum.
Other questions, comments there?
I think that looks good.
So again, I'll clean this up, resend it, hopefully tomorrow. And then I will also put the form together with, with all of the updates that we have, so that we can take a look at that. And we'll get that sent out. If you have questions individually about that, because I'll send it to the entire group, if you have an individual question, just email me directly, and then I can make that tweak and then resend it to the entire board. That way, we're following our proper protocols with that too. That would be great. All right?
Sounds
We
good.
good?
And we need 2 readings on this?
Based on our current policy, yes.
I thought you had told us at one point that it wasn't required.
If we had Neola, it would be required.
It would be?
It would not be required. But our policy specifically states that it has to be at a preceding meeting. You could do it at a work session, though.
So we
have
could
one.
do one,
You could do, as long
at
as
the
it's on the
financial
special
one.
meeting notice, that we'd be voting, or, doing a first
Yes.
reading on the specific policy.
Because we're doing it next week, our
Then you could-
financial.
we could do the first reading.
add
So
the
you want to do
reading
the
to
first
that.
reading at November 1st, and then do second reading November 8th?
Because we've
Yes.
shared quite a bit of thought and discussion on this specific topic. And, we, last work session, this work session, that I would be comfortable.
I get a sense that we're
Yeah, that's
we're
fine.
pretty,
Would we
we're
move
pretty
back
close
here
on this.
then in December, or would that still start in January?
We could talk about that,
I think it's a good idea to move back.
because that's not a board policy where we
yeah,
have our
that's
things.
not
so.
in that
Right,
anyway,
right.
so we
So
can
we
move
could just,
back at
yeah,
any
do
time.
whatever, okay.
Yeah.
So I'll definitely make sure I get this out to everybody tomorrow then.
Have Missy amend the agenda.
And have we already sent the sunshine notice for that yet?
If you send that to
So-
Lori tomorrow,
So we'll get that sent out tomorrow as well. That way, if there are any questions, any little tweaks based off of what you're seeing there, you guys can email me over the weekend, Monday, during the day, Tuesday, we'll get all of those adjustments made. We can do first reading on November 1st, Tuesday, and then second reading November 8th, with implementation then at our December board meeting.
Right.
Okay.
Because that still gives everybody plenty of opportunity for any additional concerns or feedback. And if for some reason we need to postpone it, that could be. But if
Sure.
it's on the agenda,
Yeah, okay.
we would have the option.
Okay. All right, we'll jump on that thing first thing here tomorrow morning then and make sure you have it. And again, I'll have both versions, the chopped up draft that we have here and the actual board policy that we would be approving.
Thanks for working on all that.
And I really do appreciate the conversation around this too. I think it's a great first step to, again, just get our arms wrapped around the meetings and make them as productive as possible. I think the other thing, just for the board, I want to continue my community conversations with people as well. I've had a lot of individual conversations, had some small group conversations. We need to continue that, and I know both Bill and I, as we've been talking about some of the work that lies ahead for us, I think, even taking the Bill and Craig show on the road and trying to go around and have conversations about, what's going on, curriculum-wise, operations-wise, financial-wise in the district, so that we can address different groups is going to be a really important step for us, I think, moving forward too. Just, again, I think all of those meetings that I've had up to this point have been so productive because it's allowed me to hear from a wide variety of people in kind of a give and take conversation type way. And I think that's where, a lot of the work that we need to do as a district can come out of those conversations. You know, it's hard to do that in a regular board meeting session, you know, which, you know, the purpose of public participation is to hear comments and concerns. Okay, now we can take that and make some adjustments. But, you know, that conversation that we can have sitting across the table from each other or over a cup of coffee somewhere, I think those are where the power in our conversations lie. Again, that's one of my commitments to the community as well. I want to make sure that we're hearing that.
I think it's a great investment, you know, time.
Speaking of time, I know we're already 17 minutes past our ending time here.
I would like to address it. I mean, the pronoun thing's been pushed off now 2 months.
In the
And
DEI committee
yeah,
work,
it's been-
I'd like to
yeah.
see a little bit of the data if we could.
But
Can do a
I
couple
feel
of,
like the pronoun thing, we really have been pushed off, and I don't want to push off again. I want to have the discussion so we can move forward.
We
So,
could probably close it down in a hurry, too, because I'm going to suggest we take it off. It's in first reading status, and the next thing becomes second reading, but it sounds like to me the pronoun survey is going to be greater, a new outline. Are we going to rebuild the existing suggestion we have on the pronoun survey, or start it all over? If we're going to start it all over again, we'll have to just take it off the table, write a new one, come to the agreement, put it for the first reading, and then perhaps the following month, we can do it and pass it in the second. But to continue to sit it, when did we put it on as first reading? What month was that?
August.
August.
So that's why I just don't want to, I mean, people in the community have been asking me especially, and I don't want to continue to string them along. Like, if we're not
Yeah.
unanimous about it, let's just vote on it and move along. You
And-
know, I mean, I don't want it to go into another month, and then it's December before we talk about
But
it.
I think what Tom is saying is table it until the language.
Take it
is-
off. Take it off.
Take it off, just take
You
it off.
mean
off.
take-
You don't
Table
vote,
it?
you don't vote.
Yeah,
You don't
no.
vote on the first reading.
But we already had a first reading, so
Yeah,
you're
you
saying
don't
completely.
vote. So we're not going to come to a second reading on it because it has to be all written again. So how do we edit it? And now
You mean
that
if we get a
edited
new
version
one?
becomes what?
We'd have to have a new first reading anyway.
So you're saying, don't, if we're going to change what was proposed in August, then don't just do away with it and do another first reading and a second reading and,
That's what you have to do, is come back to a first reading because you're going to edit it. We're going to change it.
but it sounded like we weren't, I guess we need to have that whole conversation because it sounded like from Craig, what you were saying, you didn't want a policy on it.
I would suggest right now we not have a policy. Based on all the legal conversations and committees and workshops that I've been in over the last 2 months, and this has been probably 3 or 4 different law firms have said, this is something you don't even want to touch as a school district right now because there's so much conflicting legal connotation to this right now. Let it work out in the court systems and the federal regulations and in the state laws, and then work through whatever it is that you're going to be doing now.
So then we have to reverse what was sent out by Tim Hammond.
Right.
Because right now, that's sitting out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's an
The
opinion,
teachers
it's a
all
pseudo
received,
policy.
received it, and that was supposed to be only an isolated incident, which we described to everybody else.
So,
We gave them a practice, a best practice, so to speak.
and again, so here's what I would suggest. Again, we don't have administrative guidelines right now. This might be an administrative guideline type of piece to the puzzle. We currently aren't doing pronoun surveys in grades K through 5. We haven't heard of any of those taking place. I'm not aware of one at the middle school level. There may have been, but we're not aware of it. There may have been a couple at the high school level last year, maybe 1 or 2 this year, and we're not 100% certain. What I would say to our teaching staff is if we're going to be doing a pronoun survey, that needs to be shared ahead of time with parents so that there's an opt-out opportunity. I would also suggest that if there is a pronoun survey being done, that there's an opt-out answer possibility in that question for the student to personally opt out of that answer.
But would you be asking the student or the parent? And would you expect every parent to respond to it?
Instead of,
those that
you're
wouldn't-
talking like opt-in?
Opt out and opt in? Give them an opt in.
No, so if there's a survey being done, that survey would need to be sent out to parents ahead of time so that they could opt out if they so choose.
And we would track those opt-out options. And those who did not respond, we would chase them down until we got their
Very
response.
similar to what we do in other opt-out situations, whether it's a piece of curriculum or so we still have parents that
He's
are.
saying something different, though.
Yeah, are we
He's
going to say
talking
if they
opt-in.
don't submit the opt-out, we acknowledge that, well, if you didn't opt out, you're in.
Right.
See, that's like you have to have a
That's what an
lack of a
opt-out is.
negative.
Oh, an opt-out
Then you
means
put 'em in.
you have the responsibility to make your wishes known, just like a student who's photographed
And so
to
they
be
don't.
used.
So they don't.
Then,
And that's
And
why I
they
put
don't
the-
for a number of reasons. Maybe they didn't get the piece of mail. Maybe they didn't open their email account.
And that's the other reason I'm suggesting we have that opt-out answer within that question as well, because if a student has an issue with that question being asked of them, they have the opportunity not to answer it.
option.
So that gives us another layer of, no, I'm not gonna answer this question.
This is very fair because it gives the transparency. The parents know that there is a survey that is going out. You know, we are surveying, you know, this survey will be given in whatever class on pronouns. It is very clear. People have the right to know that. They understand that it's happening. And if you would not like your child to participate in it, you can opt out here.
So it basically goes back to, I think, I don't have it on me, but our current policy, I don't know if you could pull it up, Craig, but it would fall under sex behaviors and attitudes then, it sounds like, because that's, and that, to your point, Ginny, at that meeting in August when I brought it up, you said, well, it sounds like it should just fit under there. So, and I believe that says it's an opt-out.
7 point,
7.01, maybe?
that sounds right.
7.01? I don't have it in front of me.
7.3, I thought, something.
7.03?
Well, I think that the
Surveys?
concern with just saying
9.01?
that
Go down
I think
to
it's a nine.
7.3
falls,
something.
though, is that legally, we're not sure that
Yeah,
that
7.30.
Well, you're good.
falls.
And I can't imagine that we're going to have a survey that's just about pronouns. That would be a small
Yeah.
component
Right.
of something. So let's say it
But again, if that
was-
question is asked in a get-to-know-you type of
Be
back-to-school, you know, you need
you
to
make
make
that
sure that,
bigger?
yeah.
And per Ohio Revised Code, the parent has the right to examine the survey.
Surveys.
So
Go
that,
down to the definition of survey, though. Up.
Oh, sorry.
Stop. Down. Keep going. Great.
Evaluation right there, 5. So it's pretty broad.
And that's been part of the
Without
issue
written
with
consent.
some of the legal pieces to the puzzle too. What is a survey? So really, it would almost be, you know, if we're asking this question, whatever format it is, make sure that it's done ahead of time.
And how would you tell teachers about this, since it's not going to be a policy?
That would be something we would work through our principals with.
And then will you be sending out an updated email to sixth grade teachers and up about what you had already sent out? Or do you stand by what you sent out?
No,
Like I said.
no, this is, what I've stated here today is what I feel we need to do.
Okay, so you would then send out to sixth grade teachers and up an updated email with the new you would call them administrative guidelines as to this is what we're going to do, and it's opt-out. Now, what about if a student does come up to the teacher, would you still treat that the same as what you had stated in the email where parents wouldn't be notified?
And again, that's where the legal pieces to the puzzle are so challenging right now. Here's what I would suggest. If you've got a student that comes to a teacher and says, I would like to be called these pronouns, or is indicating to them that they are going through some things from a gender identity standpoint, teachers should be working with that student to figure out, okay, how are we going to support you as we're going through this process here? Oftentimes, I don't think those teachers have the right training to be able to handle that. My suggestion would be that that teacher works with that student to approach their counselor to have that conversation, since those are the individuals in our district that have as close to that type of training to support that student in working through whatever supports they might need in that situation. I would also suggest that that counselor would work with that student to identify if there is knowledge with the family and start working through a communication plan with that student, with their family, if that's something that they would deem appropriate at that time.
And what's deemed appropriate? Like, what would be inappropriate?
If there is a significant issue of safety,
And that's because we have those situations now, right? Where
Right.
we have to report certain
Right.
things to Child Protective Services.
Right.
So why are we treating this different than we would treat anything else? Like, why aren't we just saying, tell the parents, let them know, keep them involved, unless there is a significant safety concern, and then we have to report it, if there is
I
one.
think that there's legal protections with what you say to a counselor. So if a child says, I don't want my family to know about this, and you don't feel that the child is being currently harmed at home or is a threat to themselves, then you're not mandated. You're not a mandated reporter.
because the language in the regulations now states you need student consent.
And what language is that? Because I haven't seen the update
And
at all from that.
We'll be able to pull that for you.
Okay.
Um,
Because I brought 4 different lawsuits that have been won.
And again, there are 4
by-
different lawsuits
Right,
on the other
so I'm
side
just
too,
saying
so
to
that's
make-
why I don't even want to go down this road.
But you did though with the email that you sent out. So that's why we need to address it, right? Like, this wouldn't be a topic if we didn't have the email sent out, and now people are aware of it, so we need to address it. And it's tough. I get it. It's not an easy thing because there are cases on this side and cases on that
Yeah.
side. But I think what was left out there for the teachers, we all know we've had subs that won't sub because of it. We have teachers who are uncomfortable with it. We've got teachers who are totally fine with it. And parents, they're all across the board.
Right.
But it's up to us to provide that direction as to if this happens, what are we telling people now? Because we sent out something already, so.
And that's why
Yeah.
that's why I'm going through what my comments would be.
But I don't see it different as to other issues that a child might come to a counselor with. A child might come to a counselor with, so many different things. They're struggling with their parents' divorce and that doesn't mean that you call home immediately unless you feel like they're a threat to themselves. There's a certain privacy there. They're a mental health professional. They're licensed as such.
But if you know that if there is a gender identity situation or transgender, there is a higher risk of suicide. So if we know that a child is at a higher risk, why are we not involving the parents? I think.
Because we have our trained mental health people that do a risk assessment, and unless they're high on the risk, then they can't legally just contact parents. Just because someone has a gender identity doesn't mean that you need to call home and act as if something's
So
wrong.
if a child commits suicide and we hid it from the parents that they were transgender or, using different bathrooms or whatnot, is that not on us as a school district? Like, how does that work? You know, I just want to make sure that we're not putting ourselves out there for risk. And I would hate to ever see somebody tragically pass away because the parents didn't know about it, and who are we to say the parents would or would not support that child? You know, is it based on their home life, their religious beliefs? Like, what are we putting these parameters around?
Well, I don't think we're saying that. I think it's the child that would say.
The minor
I know
child.
that my parents have said they will kick me out of the home. You know, I mean, that does happen.
I understand that, but I don't think, I mean, I think with the risk being higher of suicide, we have to really thread that needle very carefully. And I think parents, I don't want to usurp parents' rights. I mean, I think everybody here knows where I am.
Oh, you know, they're
on
not
this, but-
suicidal because they're, in the LGBTQ community, they're suicidal because they're not accepted. And they're not accepted at home.
They're-
In some cases. I mean, yes,
Sure, there are
many
some
very
cases where it's like
supportive
that.
homes, but the kids know. If their parents aren't supportive, they would fear.
Well, I mean, if that's how we're going to handle it, I think parents deserve to know. So whatever we decide on, I think we should email parents as well and let them know how we're going to handle those situations. You know, as long as we're being transparent about it, fine. At least that puts the ball back in the parents' court, that they know then that we are not going to notify them necessarily unless it's up to the child. And is there age restriction? What if it's a 5-year-old?
Unless
Then
there's
what?
a serious threat. If we feel that there's a serious threat, that the child is suicidal, then that's different. But yes, if a child is saying, I'm going to hurt myself, I have a plan, you know, there is very specific, there's a rating scale that goes with that, that's a different conversation. And yes, then parents are notified.
Well, right now, I mean, there's litigation right now out of, I believe it's Florida, because parents were not told about their child being transgender in school, and then that child tried to commit suicide. And the reason why they didn't tell the parents is just because they were Catholic. And the parents had no problem with it, but they weren't told about it. So you have both extremes. You've got people who will absolutely say, I don't, you know, we're gonna kick you out, or, and then you've got the opposite, where parents are being left out completely and we're usurping their right as a parent. So I just think whatever we decide, parents deserve to know, and also there needs to be an email that's followed up to 6th grade teachers and up.
Well, I guess my point is that it's not black and white, that there are some cases where you're notifying the parent. There's some cases where you're not notifying the parent. That the mental health professional is trained for that decision. And we should make sure that our mental health professionals are trained to the highest way to deal with that situation.
Are guidance counselors, though? I mean, this sounds like more of a crossroads thing than guidance counselors.
That's why we have both in there.
So,
I know, it seems to me that we put too much on our teachers to have to make that first judgment. They're licensed to be teachers and not licensed to be a mental health counselor. And if they don't answer, they don't refer it forward and something does happen,
right.
it's on the school system.
That's why I'm saying we should work with that student to work.
And
with
we're asking
that
our
counselor.
teachers to do too much and take on something that's it's not their job. I'm sorry. You've
Yeah.
heard that saying, it's not my job, Mom.
I
It's
think
okay.
all
It's
of
not
our
my job.
guidance counselors' goal is to help a student make that journey to include their family. That communication piece is always a goal, and it's something that, and the younger the student, the more critically timely that goal is. So I think the general, and as Maggie said, you do have some situations that are very complicated, but in general, the goal is to, how can I help you have that conversation with your parents?
So do we have an age, though? Like, I mean, elementary school, are we, if a child comes to, we're not going to tell their parents, you know, like,
Yeah.
are we, like, can we at least provide some kind of guideline age-wise for our teachers? And say, you know, if it's elementary, or, you know, kindergarten through 9th grade, this is how we're going to handle it, or,
I think that
it's refer to the mental health professional, and then the mental health professional has to make a call. It's, how do you say that once you turn 10, or once you turn,
I mean,
I don't know. I don't know
age-
that, I'm not an expert in that, so that's, and no one here is, I mean, we can't make a call like that.
No, but I definitely think, I mean, I don't know how anybody else feels, or Tom or whatnot, but elementary is very different than high schoolers. Middle school also is different than high schoolers. And I think it's absurd to think that any elementary school student should be able to hide that from their parents, even if they go to the counselor. I don't think there should be a counselor step. If it's elementary school, parents directly. I mean, those are kids that are like, what are we talking about? Under 10, 10,
Oh,
under
I
11?
do see it very different, and I would imagine, although I'm not a trained mental health professional, well, I would imagine that our mental health professionals in the elementary are trained differently, and they would handle it differently than if the student was a high school student. So we need to make sure, our job is to make sure that our mental health professionals are trained really well, and that our elementary mental health professionals are trained for elementary students. So if we had that situation, they know how to handle it, and they, I'm sure, would handle it differently than, but I don't know, and I don't want to make that decision.
I mean, I think parents have certain rights
They do.
to their
They
children,
absolutely do.
especially elementary school children. So I understand what
All
you're
kids,
saying,
really.
but I stand firm that I do think parents need to be involved, and whatever the board decides is what the board decides collectively as a whole, because I'm only one person, but
Well, what's being proposed is that we get feedback from state lawmakers, federal lawmakers, and our advising attorneys, so that whatever we do determine are the steps in policy, because, yeah, we make policy based on that input from other sources, since we're not qualified to do that, but that's not clear yet. So in the interim, we do the very best we can to,
so are we waiting for Title IX proposed changes to see if they're going to change, or what, I guess, what is because as of today, it's different than if those changes go through.
And again, that's the reason I would argue strongly against any policy being put in place, because those things are going to change so often. We would be coming to the board with virtually annual changes to this policy.
If that's necessary, then that's what we'd have to do, Greg. We just,
Yeah.
we couldn't keep waiting. Yeah. Harking back to I don't want the teachers to feel the pressure that they have to make the decision of the referral. That's totally wrong. That's not what they're licensed to do. Ginny, you were a teacher.
no, I agree.
Did you ever have to do that?
Never. And if I had a situation like that, my first step would be to tell the student, let's have a conversation with your guidance counselor and hand off to somebody who is trained in that
I just think
skill
that
set.
that's just the protocol that we're suggesting, is that the teacher isn't making the decision because the protocol is the
But no,
referral's
that-
made.
The policy that went out from Tim Hammond
No.
indicated that. Make a choice. Didn't it say that? Correct.
And that's why I'm saying,
Outlined in that?
what I'm saying is we need to make sure that the teachers are helping that student have the conversation with their counselor. That would be the way I would approach it.
100% of them.
Yeah.
Turn it
Because
over.
That would be for all kinds of complex issues. Other than if you suspected abuse, then your obligation is to call Child Protective Services directly. You're a mandated reporter, and there's no other way around that. You must make the call, even if you believe others may have. But let's say you had a student that you thought seemed very sad, or, that there was a change in their behavior that you had a concern about, counselor would be my first go-to.
Yes.
Because they're also
So we're
able to
suspending
talk with the other
The
teachers that
idea
that
with an
child's
opt-out,
got.
right? Students, parents receiving that.
Is that
That's
the,
two different issues.
Two different things. We're talking about the survey as a whole, if that's
the
asked,
pronoun?
the pronoun survey.
Yeah, so
and
the
then-
pronoun survey piece to the puzzle, that needs to be shared ahead of time with an opt-out option. The follow-up piece is more of the transgender issue, where a student would be coming to a teacher to say, I didn't ask, as the teacher, I didn't ask you, Tom, that, what pronouns you wanted to be called, but you came to me and said, I want to be called she, her. Okay, what do I do with that information now as a teacher? That's the conversation. And what we're saying at that point is, we need to make sure we're working with the professionals that we have in our buildings to address those issues. That's why I need to work with you to have that conversation with our counseling staff.
Right.
So now the teacher, though, is still going to be put in a situation, like during conferences, who's going to advise them what to do with a conference? Do we call them by their biological name or by the name that's in school? Do we call them by their biological pronoun, or do we call them by the pronoun that the child wants? I think those are administrative guidelines that need to be set so that teachers have a clear understanding of what are they supposed to do. Because as much as we want to pass it along to the guidance counselor, they're still getting phone calls, emails, correspondence.
And perhaps they could discuss that issue with the student in counseling, because it will come up.
Annie, you're just talking about when the parent and the teacher are having conversation.
Like parent-teacher conferences. or
about their
the
child.
Or it could be an email, if the teacher slips up and doesn't use the biological pronoun, now the parent knows, and now it's back on the teacher.
It could be the way they sign their name on their work.
Which,
On the teacher how, though? Can you clarify that for me?
yeah, so if it's parent-teacher conferences and the parent doesn't know that their child is going by
Okay.
something different, and that it puts them back in the predicament of, it's on my shoulders, not on somebody else's shoulders. Or in an email, if they're emailing into the teacher and the teacher is used to calling, the child by a male pronoun, but the parent, says the female pronoun. There needs to be guidance.
It's valid,
Yeah.
and I don't know.
And again, I think that's where we go back to the training for these
Well, I
mental health
think that becomes
specialists
part of the
too.
discussion, more so back of getting the student to work with the counselor to communicate that to the
communicate
parent,
that
right?
to the
Because
parent.
Yeah,
If
that's
a
always their goal.
student is comfortable enough to tell an educator that they want to go by a specific name or pronoun, the goal would be, based on what I have in my notes here, and correct me if I'm wrong, so I don't have it wrong, is to get the student, with the help of the counselor, to communicate to the parent.
Yeah.
Because that would be part of that discussion, right? Like,
Yep.
if you asked me to call you she, her, and if I communicate with your parent, ultimately, I could slip. Not because
That's
I'm
what I'm saying.
intentionally trying
Right.
to do anything other than the fact that we have a conversation about your education.
Right.
This is why it's important that we have your parents involved in that
Right.
discussion, right? I mean,
That's a good
couldn't
point,
that
yeah.
be part of that discussion? Because, I mean, that's a reality.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to have to communicate with your parents about a multitude of things.
Right.
Regarding school.
Right.
What we're here for,
Right.
right? Like, so it could be that situation. And I've seen that happen with just regular names, right? Like,
Right. Nicknames.
you go by, his name is Anthony, and you want me to call him AJ, and he wants me to call him Tone. The next thing I know is you're at a conference, and I called, and you're like, who? Oh, no, he has me call him Tone, right? Like,
That's true.
It's, again, I'm not saying gender identity and names are the same, but I mean, that's just a situation where things in the schools can happen, and it's nobody's fault, because particularly, and I lived in high schools, I mean, that's where I spent all my career. Things are different at a high school than they are at an elementary
Right,
level.
right.
And again, that middle school level is the challenging part for us, I believe, because, where is that age of maturity that we need to consider?
So would this be an administrative guideline then? Is that what you were thinking? Like this process would be an administrative guideline, or?
It would fall under what is our practice as a school district, which is basically what an administrative guideline does. Now, would we physically do that? I don't know if we put it in writing anywhere, because we've got individual situations that are different from one person to the next.
Your guideline could be that, you know,
I like
the
the
goal of the
we are
district.
working
Yeah, the goal of
towards-
the district is to have,
Family support.
you know, to have a, you know, kind of like that policy,
A
that the
communication
language is
plan
up there that
with
all,
the
you know, there
family.
would be, you know, it'd be a class, whatever the lines below in the paragraph below, or like the relationship between the parents and the school is symbiotic, right? Like, that is our intent, and part of educating a kid is to get them to get over their fears, right? I mean, that's an inherent thing. I mean, a kid gets in trouble at school, they don't want to tell their parents.
To help them communicate with
And
their
it's
parents.
part of that educational process to get them to do that. And then if there is an issue with the family, it's also our obligation to make sure that that parent's held responsible for that and the right authorities are called.
Absolutely.
Right, like if a student is going to get abused or neglected or kicked out,
Right.
like, and they're under the age of 18, like, we have a right to,
Right,
like, say,
report
hey,
that.
like, Job and Family Services, this is going on, and then to have continual supports for that student after report to check in with her or him to say, how is it going? What things can we do? And trying to, like, foster that, because, and that's general of anything, though, you know, what I mean, I
Right.
think that should be,
And that's why we're
that's
so
always been our
fortunate to
standard.
have
I mean,
those
again, I worked here
services.
before, right? Like, I was here for 5 years as a high school principal. I ran the school, successful enough to be called back, right? Like, at least, you know, in the sense,
your
and that's,
problem.
yeah, but that's always been what we've done. Like, we can't forget that. Like, this isn't new.
No.
But I like what you said, and I think if you had at least some kind of administrative guideline that would speak to that, I mean, parents would at least feel a little bit more confidence in knowing that that is the ultimate goal, is so that
And
they're
I
working
think that's
together.
been in practice for some time. It may not have been verbalized in that way or reflected in Mr. Hammond's letter, but I know, you know, just in general, our counseling staff, they always recognize that a child, a minor child, benefits from the loving support of his or her family. And sometimes, just like, you know, I don't want my parent to know I had a F on my math test. Kids in general want to please their parents, rise to the expectations that their moms and dads or guardians have for them. So the guidance counselor's role is to help them understand they love you, they want to help you. If you're having trouble broaching this conversation, let's do that together. How can I help you do that? That I know is part of their regular practice
And
for
if a
kids.
parent isn't being supported because they don't want anything to happen, right? Like, kids, you know, maybe they don't, but it's again, it's that getting them connected them with the right resources to help the parent understand to accept their child for whoever he or she is, right? Like, again, it's making the connection with Crossroads, because that's what they do. Again, and it's then checking in with the kid. How is it at home? How is it going? You know, it's not, it's, again, it's,
Crossroads is excellent
it's a
to
cro-
connect them
it's
with
a
other
constant
community
dialogue,
resources.
because we can't, in any situation, right? We've learned this with, and again, bullying and harassment, right? The way that we handle it now and the way we handled it 20 years ago are drastically different, right? We know we have to follow up with the victim, we have to follow up with the aggressor, we have to continually check in, because just because I disciplined Jenny for, you know, harassing Craig, doesn't mean that that solved the issue, right? I gotta go back and check on Craig
Gonna cut it
repeatedly
out, I
to make
promise.
sure that there's not an issue there. So, I mean, the same thing holds true in a scenario where a parent may not be accepted, right? Because we know that that could happen, but we shouldn't let that fear dictate how we do things, right? We should then take the steps that we need to kind of control that. And I think that's what I heard Craig say. I mean, when you talked, that's what I heard. But again, my understanding is a lot different than the general public, because I've lived this for
Right,
21
you've been
years,
in it.
right? Like,
Yeah.
I've seen it. So,
So could you then do administrative guidelines that kind of speaks to what you guys just talked about?
I've got some written down.
Okay, and then that would be also sent out to the sixth grade and up teachers?
Yeah, because we'll obviously need more conversation, starting with our principals, then going to our counselors, involving Crossroads as well, so that everybody's aware of what we are striving to do with this process, that can then be shared with the teachers. You know, so that there are some steps we're going to be taking to have those conversations.
To your point, Annie, you said a case where a student was in trouble because they feared that a parent wouldn't be accepting. A lot of times, not even just kids, all of us may have anticipated expectations. And we're anxious about an outcome that may or may not happen. But we recognize that by opening that dialogue with the student first and talking about how that could be put together so that there is a support in place and it can be figured out. And then that's a big stress reliever for everybody. You know, sometimes the parent doesn't know, sometimes they do. But they don't maybe want to consider it or tip the balance in a particular way by opening a conversation. So I think our wonderful counselors and our Crossroads partners can facilitate good outcomes.
I'm sure the children want them to know
Mhm.
and to accept.
Right. And so
It's just
helping.
not, doesn't always
They just don't
happen,
know how to talk
but
about it.
they don't know how to say it. They don't know how to start the conversation. So, yes, we want parents to know, but sometimes it's not a pick up the phone and call process. There's, talking with the child and helping them create that conversation.
And there can even be different responses from different parents in a family. You know, one parent may find it an easier thing to adjust to than another. But again, having somebody help those conversations, and I know for sure that is a goal,
And I think this is where we would be looking at, what other outside experts, once we get to that point, can we bring in to help support that student and that family as we're going through this process? And I know there are great resources in the county that we can tap into that will help us navigate some of that as well.
I understand what you guys are saying. I just feel different about parents' rights, I guess. I just feel like who knows the child better than the parents, in the majority of situations. I do understand there are the certain situations that wouldn't be a
Yeah,
fit into the
there
mold.
are individual
Right,
things that are
so
gonna be
I get
different.
that, but I guess I just view it a little different. I just do.
Well, it's interesting because you dealing with juvenile minds. There's no other mind like it. Once you become an adult, you move away from that. Children are up and down, change their minds, impressed, they're followers, they're leaders, they follow their friends, they look up to someone who is now, today, they're in electronic media, and all this drives them to change their mind, change who they are, do something different, feel left out, feel in, feeling out, changing. Parents, I can't speak for all parents, but sometimes parents don't have a clue what their kids are doing. And I'm not going to say that's the majority, or the minority of the kids and the parents. And so what we want to do is be everything to those children and not involve the parents right away. Because someone might, how many children speak to their parents like they speak to their friends? Do all parents talk to their children like adults? Do they all engage in conversation with their parents? Do they get on TikTok and whatever media there is, and they see and they're led astray, let's say, not that, but they change their minds today. They don't dress the same as everybody else. And so we have to engage and protect okay, you don't want the child to get hurt by it, but at what point do you say, the parents need to know? Parents have a right to know their kids are, let's say, acting differently. And when you protect the child and don't let the parents know, how do the parents take corrective action? We seem to want to leave them out until it's really an issue. We've said it's an issue now. The parents need to know regardless if they do or they don't know. Well, maybe they know. And maybe they'll say, well, that's fine. Jimmy can be called Jamie. No problem. It's all done. But the more stress we put on the children, that will push them too to being suicidal or harming themselves or introverted. We participate in that process. We have to not accelerate it, but we have to move it along. The parents, whether it's one parent, two parents, or four parents, maybe they're remarried, somebody else needs to know. Do we have enough counselors to deal with all these issues? Do we have one in every building?
That's why we've
Are they traveling
expanded
counselors?
counseling and Crossroads, because this is a pretty dramatic and fairly rare situation. But all the other things, kids who are depressed or feeling very anxious, where it's really interfering with their success, those services have been invaluable because we can make them available very quickly, where, you know, on the outside, it's very costly.
Well, there's other issues that they face. The children aren't just transgender.
No,
You know,
that's
it's who they
a
hang
very
out with, who they
minority
are, you know, the pronoun issue. There's so many issues.
Yeah, I mean,
And
bullying or
Death in the
Parents should
family,
be
death in the family,
divorce.
divorce.
aware of as much as possible. I mean, children don't even tell their parents, I'm getting bullied at school. I know that for sure.
I think all of us, if you've had kids, I at least, it's very humbling to find out that they had you completely fooled. You thought, not my kid. Doing fine, like, oh, who's involved in that? Yeah, so, you know, we, obviously, big things you hope you would recognize just in their demeanor, but, you know, sometimes they live kind of a separate other life on the outside than they are at home. You know, there's some kids that are horrible at home and are wonderful on the outside, and vice versa. Because I have a little piece of that nice, you know. So I think by having a good team of well-trained mental health professionals, counselors as partners in helping all kids find their happiest future, that's always our goal, whether it's academics or other social issues, you know.
Well, and when kids are regulated, they're better learning, and that's
Yes,
really our focus.
absolutely.
You know, when you're struggling with things internally, it's really hard to focus and learn.
Well, and I think, you know, our current policy right now that we have, parental involvement in education, it does speak to parenting, you know, and parenting skills are promoted and supported. We're going to have parents be full partners in the decisions that affect children and families.
But yet we leave them out.
Right. And I don't think we're all going to agree on it, and that's okay. But at the very least, I would like, when you do send out the email, I would like for us to know prior to everybody else getting it, so that we have a heads up. And then if there are, you know, administrative guidelines, I think we should all know about that as well before they're posted.
I would appreciate that.
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan.
So I'll work through that communication plan then with some of the guidance that we've talked about here. Because some of that may change based on who we talk to as well, from the counseling standpoint, from the Crossroads standpoint. And I want to make sure that we're very clear on that, but we will make sure that we're working towards that goal here sooner rather than later.
Sounds good.
All right. Any other comments? All right. So So communication plan around the preferred pronoun transgender conversations. Public participation policy, first reading on November 1st. And then I'm calling Mary Ann Motley about the K-3 literacy thing for line 207 from the OSBA handbook. And Tom, I'll get you that answer. Well, I'll send it to everybody as well. So those are my 3 to-dos right now coming out of the meeting. Is there anything else I'm missing?
Are we moving the diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff to the next week's meeting, or are we moving it further? Is yours gonna be real long?
To put on my meeting.
We're already past his time limit.
What, you get an hour for that?
I got 4 hours set aside for next Tuesday. I expect everybody who's in here to be back.
I'm actually gonna be sick. I forgot to tell you.
4 glorious hours.
Yeah. Lots of charts.
Again, I wouldn't mind pushing it off just a little bit longer because my meeting with our internal group is tomorrow, where I'm supposed to get a little bit more in-depth data from them. Again, just to, and I do have the general data that I wanted to send out to our group here as well. I do have that narrowed down a little bit from the 41 slides that they gave me. It's down to 24 at least. But I can give you some highlights to that, so that at least we know where we're heading with some of that. And again, our internal group has done such a good job of really digging in and looking closely at the data so that we can identify what those needs are moving forward. Maggie and I had our one-on-one conversation here last night as well on one of the, speaking of the transgender issue piece as well. Obviously, we don't have specific data around our transgender population or LGBTQ population. But I think with the conversations around what this administrative guideline may be, part of what I shared with Maggie was, I would like to talk to our counseling staff, get a sense for, okay, what are the numbers, what sorts of supports have we been utilizing, what sort of external people are we bringing in, and just what are our students telling us that they need, so that can inform what that internal DEI group, or if we call it by a different name this year, it potentially could be that as well. But really trying to get a little bit more information on that demographic so that we've got some action steps that we can put in place. Like I said, it's very good data right now. Got some things around academics, attendance, discipline, and safety pieces to the puzzle that are very interesting right now. And there are a couple of subgroups that are kind of raising to the top, and our African-American population, our multiracial population, economically disadvantaged, and our students with disabilities are 4 of those demographics right now that have different pockets that really need some additional supports. And what are those things that we can utilize within our school system to support them moving forward?
I love the specificity of using that snapshot on those various pullouts of student populations within the larger one, because sometimes if you can zero in and make those improvements, it can have a halo effect that benefits so many. And we also address the state report card issues that were disappointing in some of those areas in terms of performance academically.
Right.
We were talking about how it could be looked at as targeted interventions for specific groups, populations that we have the data. So it's more of like a tiered intervention versus a DEI approach, but more like a
I just think we have to be careful with
intervention.
some of the materials that have been provided to us in the past, as we know, the better lessons and things like that. And then, sometimes who we're picking and choosing to do, the contracting for the DEI, we've got to be careful what's in that material, because some of it references white privilege, and white privilege is not something that is accepted by the the whole, everybody in Mentor, you know? So I think when we talk about white privilege or unconscious bias, implicit bias, you know, those are things that we have to be careful with. And I think as a board too, anytime we pick somebody to address issues, we should probably make sure we vet
Like
those programs.
unconscious issues. I'd like to know what those are.
Well, I think what you're saying,
mind's
Craig,
not
is,
engaged.
and correct me if I'm wrong, is that we're, at this point, not picking a group. We're picking what our focus in the district is, like, what is our goal? What do we need to accomplish? Do we need to have training on sensitivity, cultural, racial sensitivity, sensitivity to disabilities? Do we need to have,
That's interesting now.
You know, we
What
don't know
crosses
until
all
we look
those
at our
levels
data.
you just spoke of? Bullying is in each of those classes you just mentioned. It crosses all of it, but yet we don't hear the importance of bullying. That seems to be left out of this. And
So let me just share two quick things that kind of touch on both of these. First of all, these are some of the charts and graphs that have been provided to me. And this is looking at our state report card information by race or ethnicity. Again, right in here, 16.7% is our students with disabilities. Here's 46.6% for our black students. Here's 53.4% for our multiracial students. These are areas, obviously, that we're going to be digging into a little bit further. This just gives us an idea of, you know, how they performed. Are they proficient on those tests? So that's one area that we can jump in. The other one, Tom, that you just mentioned, we look at bullying and cyberbullying from our survey data, and our white students are at 19%, our black students 24%, talking about that being something that is impacting them the most.
Craig, what's the number of respondents that we had?
So you can, I
can't
believe
see,
that's
sorry.
19 there, so it's relatively small. So
And how
again,
many-
that's why we're digging into that data a little bit more deeply to
I'd like to
see
know
what
what-
exactly the questions are and who's
And how
answering
many
it.
answered it, yeah, that, because I don't think we only have that many black
No.
students. So, I mean, if only 19 answered, but we have 500, then,
Right.
you know.
Right,
I'm
here's
just
our
saying, we have to-
multiracial.
We kind of have to know the other,
So here's our other
we kind of have to know our
demographic too.
data.
This is multiracial. This is 19% for white, 31% for multiracial. So again, there are significant differences in that percentage. But again, we want to dig a little bit deeper to see what that means.
So
And
getting
again,
base
getting
numbers
into,
for all of, like across the board for all of the different categories, I would like base numbers.
because the other thing that we've done is something similar to this, where what we're looking at, this happens to be an indice or an index that's put together. 1.0 means that it's comparable to the population. So these are the numbers of students that are identified as gifted in our district. So white is, is close to that proportional piece. We're at a 0.17 for black, we're at 0.63 for multiracial, which are significantly below. Same with our economically disadvantaged number. Now, compared that to the state of Ohio, again, from the black students, we are significantly different from the state. Multiracial, we're a little bit lower. Economically disadvantaged, we're actually a little bit higher. But those are some other ways that we're digging in to account for some of that difference in the end size that we have with the data as well. So that's what we want to do with some of the other data that we're looking at here. The one that Maggie had also brought up to us, this is the percentage of students with disabilities by ethnicity. So whites at 13.7%, multiracials at 20%. Our black students are at 29.5%.
This one came to my attention because our district was actually flagged a couple years ago, for like 2 years in a row, where we were flagged for the over-identification of Black students. So it is improving. I know you're not seeing that on this. It has improved, but, again, the data is the data, and then we have to look at why. Was it over-identification, or do we really just have a higher percentage of Black students with disabilities? We don't know that from this chart, but it's something that we should think about, because it was enough that the state flagged us and said, you need to put an action plan in place because something's wrong.
Could you go back to the bar graph that was 2 back, or 1 back, where you had the ethnicity? Yeah, that one. Does that break down further into number of years, like he or she is in her 12th grade?
Right.
How many years did that 12th grader, was he enrolled, he or she
No,
enrolled
doesn't it usually
in the
just
school?
compare
3
seniors
years,
to
6
seniors to
years?
Seniors, not,
Right.
So we can't
So
tell
we
based
can't tell
upon.
that. But to your point, though, Tom, one of the other slides that are in the 41 that I was given, they looked at the mobility rate of different demographic groups. And that would
Well, I don't know if
actually-
I'm calling it mobility rate. I guess I like that name, but how
But
many
that-
years they've
but
been in
what's
our
that saying?
school?
Yeah, but what that's saying is.
That's what it measures.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what that's
It's
measuring
like-
is, how many, what's the percentage of students in that demographic?
How many
that are-
years?
Are staying in our district, or are they moving in and out of our district?
Of,
So,
like a breakdown, 1 to 3,
yeah,
4 to 6,
Yep.
4 different demographics.
yeah.
because
And where they are in their career, how many years were they
Instability
here?
can be really-
Boom, it's like, hey, we see that. They're here 9 years. Well,
Yeah.
that's good, but
That's
they're
why
only here
homeless laws
1
are the way
year.
they are too, though. I mean, that's because they don't
1
want
year can
students
skew
who are
it.
homeless to have to leave their district because they know when students leave a district, then they have a high mobility rate that their
Yeah.
education suffers.
But again, that's something that we can dig into, Tom, too.
In
As
each
we're,
one of
as we're
those
looking at
colors.
this, as we're looking at this group that's performing at 46.6% are actually passing or proficient on these state tests. Okay, let's dig into that group a little bit. Is there a mobility question out of some of those students that aren't achieving where we would hope them to achieve? And what can we put in place to support them, to make sure that we're being very specific with our interventions as we move forward?
Craig, I know we have, some of the data, which is great. What is your thought on, because I know the internal DEI group is fairly small. And we have had the larger DEI group in the past. I know it's kind of like on hold right now, haven't met with them yet. What are your thoughts going forward with that group? And is there somebody in that group that would be representative of each of those
Of our
categories?
categories.
So that it really is diverse?
And again, I think that's I'm going to rely a lot on our internal group to start with because, again, they're some of the curriculum experts in the district, and they can help us with a lot of the academic components. They're also the ones that look very closely at the data, so they can help us kind of decipher some of that. And that's one of my little passion pieces to education too, is digging into data. So I'll be actively involved in that. And I think that group is going to lean on them a lot as far as what those action steps will be, to identify the kids and to figure out what are some of those high yield interventions that we can put in place. I think when we get into when we're looking at attendance, when we're looking at discipline practices, are there some other people that we can bring in to have those conversations? Maybe it's one of our counselors or one of our administrators to have some conversation around discipline. Is there somebody from a county resource that we might be able to bring in to have some conversations around a particular subgroup of students? Or, for example, if we're looking at attendance, are there people within, I know in Delaware County, we had a juvenile court liaison that worked very closely with us in Delaware to support those students that were having chronic absenteeism issues, and meeting with those families and identifying what the issues are. What are some of those barriers that we need to take away to get you into the classroom on a regular basis? Those are some of those things that we can start to dive into a little bit more. So I think we just need to be very specific with who it is that we're working with.
Identifying a problem is the key to doing anything that's going to help solve it.
Right.
The trend I'm seeing up there is not that good.
No.
It's not that good. I see the dark green, that's Asian and Pacific Islanders. Well, they're fairly representative consistently. The red slipped down, up to 95, down to 67.9, up to 72.
COVID.
That's the
That's that
COVID.
achievement gap that we're trying to close as well. So while we're digging
that's-
into specifics, how do we impact the overall as well, is what we have to keep our eyes on here too, Tom, as we're playing with this.
And Tom had a decent suggestion, I thought, before. I actually like the idea of a larger diversity group, because I think you do need to pull in families and parents and stakeholders for that discussion. But I know Tom had mentioned that the financial committee, the way that that went is they actually had people like apply. And then the board had like an interview process. And I don't know, Tom, can you speak a little bit more to that? Because I wasn't here for that, but I know you said it would be interesting to do that with the larger DEI committee. Especially because it was done with Bill Porter, not under you.
And Jackie, Bill Porter, Matt Miller,
Oh, that goes back to Jackie.
Jackie in the financial.
Fin-
And two board
financial
members
crisis.
were involved in the interviews. And the other treasurer and the superintendent and other financial committee members participated in the interview process, didn't they?
The one that we did, it was just you, me, Bill, and Mary,
Okay.
I think, for the two spots that we
Yeah, so
opened.
we sent out a letter
Yeah. Seeking applicants.
seeking applicants. Submit your letter of application, your resume, all the pertinent information, and then we sat down and interviewed them.
That may be a good action step for us then too, as I'm having some of the conversations with that internal group. Okay, now that we've identified some of the things that we're trying to have a positive impact on, who do we need? And let's tailor that group to meet the needs that we have, as opposed to just one big umbrella
Right.
organization. Yeah, let's focus on what our needs are.
What I love about this approach is that it's really focused on the academic achievement with data. You know, we can look at where our weaknesses are, we can create goals, we can measure it, we can reassess and see if we're on track, and it's all about the academics.
Which is our core mission.
It's our mission.
And again, that was one of the things that we had the conversation in our internal group about as well, because there was talk of, what is the mission and vision or the purpose of this particular group? And, the conversation went back to, well, what's our mission and vision for the district? That's what we need to be focusing on. Now, what are those action steps? Exactly. What are those action steps that will have a positive impact on what it is that we're trying to study here with our different demographics? Because we need to be very purposeful with what we're doing so that we can have a positive impact. So
It's
that's
the
where,
best use
that's
of
where we want to get
dollars,
there.
too,
Yeah.
you know.
I'll share some of these slides with our group here too, and maybe try within this slide that kind of is in front of the slides after it, just give you some highlights to look at from the data that I'll share. Again, tomorrow, I'll meet with that internal group and hopefully have a little bit deeper dive into that, and just continue to keep you guys updated as we're going with this work here in the future.
So we're pausing the apogee, however you say it, the
For
contract.
Yeah, for the time being,
it
until
won't
we
be-
figure out what that need is. And
Okay.
if there's a specific if there's a specific thing that Pastor Mike can help us with, then maybe we talk to him specifically about what that specific need is that we have, and is he the best person suited for
Right.
that? Again, I think we've run the professional development course a little bit, and, that may have ruffled some feathers here in the district, so, okay, let's focus on what the needs are now, and who can address those needs for us. And it may be Pastor Mike is our person. I don't know yet. Let's figure out what those needs are, and then figure out who we go with.
I like that plan.
All right, so we got the DEI stuff done.
We did it
All right, two.
You snuck it in.
He's going to write in his diary how late we went.
Well, we did it for Bill.
Bill,
We
yeah,
didn't
Bill
have to
said
do
we
2
couldn't
hours
squeeze any
next
more
week.
time out of him.
Yes, he didn't
It's all
want to
your
give up
fault.
his,
Yeah, he just
his
did his
financial.
4 or 5 hour
He'll
presentation.
be the one on.
All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Jesselin.
Yes.
Ms. Payne.
Yes.
Ms. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle. Ms. Briner.
Yes.
Meeting adjourns at 8:52 PM.
Thanks, everybody.
I'm glad I ate early today.
Should have eaten dinner before I came.